Standing committee reports.
February 20, 2024. Mr. President, Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State, and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 73, Concealed Firearms Permit Eligibility. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Hicks, Ide, Larson, and Steinmetz. No, Senators French and Kolb. Senator Steinmetz, Chairman. February 20, 2024. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 125, Parimutuel Wagering Activities Amendments. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Ellis, Grew, Jones, and Schuler. Senator Schuler, Chairman. February 20, 2024. Mr. President, your Committee Number 12, Rules and Procedures, to whom is referred Senate File 83, Revisers Bill. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Driscoll, Grew, Hicks, Kinski, and Rothfuss. Senator Driscoll, Chairman. February 20, 2024. Mr. President, your Committee Number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 111, Mule and Whitetail Deer Separate Hunting Seasons. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Ellis, Garou, Jones, and Schuler. Senator Schuler, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State, and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 109, Prohibit Red Flag Gun Seizure Act. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators French, Hicks, Ide, Cole, Larson, and Steinmetz. Senator Steinmetz, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, your Committee Number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 118, Bighorn and Domestic Sheep Relocation Federal Action. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Ellis, Garou, Jones, and Schuler. Senator Schuler, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, your Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State, and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 105, Wyoming Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act, to whom respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators French, Hicks, Ide, Kolb, Larson, and Steinmetz. Senator Steinmetz, Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hopefully this is the appropriate time. I would like to have Senate File 118 be referred to Committee 2. There is an appropriation.
That objection so ordered. It's perfect time. So now I'm going to read you today in Wyoming history that I didn't have this morning. I hate to teach you guys anything really devious, but this is a little scary after what happened yesterday. 1923, the legislature experienced a 56-hour day in a questionable legislative trick designed to keep the clock from winding up on the session. This trick's been repeated since then, but this one's the longest one on record. Think about that before we start tomorrow. Quote for the day: coming together is beginning, staying together is progress, and working together is success. That's pretty sage words. Third reading amendment requests due by 5 p.m. today. So make sure you got them in. It's a hard deadline. With that, now we have coming out of the Rules Committee, we came to deal with amendment deadlines. So I kind of arbitrarily did it on the last one. Rules Committee brought it up and we ran it through. And I believe, Ellen, is this a 2/3 to pass this? I believe this is a 2/3 vote. It'll be a voice vote. So this is Senate Resolution 2. What's that? Okay. So it'll be a roll call. 11-7. Amendments to mirror budget bills, and you should have this laying on your desk. In addition to the requirements for amendments to the mirror budget bill provided in Joint Rule 14-1, no amendment shall be considered on second or third reading of a mirror budget bill unless the sponsor, by not later than 2 hours prior to the notice convening time of the next legislative day of the reading, has approved the text of the amendment and authorized the amendment to be numbered and distributed to the members of the Senate and released to the public. This rule shall not apply to amendments submitted pursuant to Joint Rule 14-1, small m, 3 little i's. Folks, what this does, it gives our staff time to get them all numbered and done. It gives the public a chance to look at them and brings it in. So the key word is whatever time the majority floor leader brings it in, you're going to have it prior to 2 hours prior to that point in time. So if he calls at 10 o'clock, you're going to be at 8. If he calls at 9 o'clock, you're going to be at 7. So that's what it is. I believe the motion is debatable, Senator Rothfuss. So we'll start on debate on it, and then we'll bring it to a debate. Senator Case.
Mr. President, thank you for a point of information. Who doesn't have to follow that rule if we were to adopt it? Who's the exception?
I think I know, but we'll allow someone else. Senator Rothfuss. Okay. Any others? Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. President. So is this going to apply, because we're going into third reading, is this going to apply immediately or for the next budget? That's my first question. I guess I'll leave it at that for now, but it's coming in awfully late and I don't know what the ramifications are going to be. And yeah, thank you.
Further debate. Questions? Senator Cole.
Yeah, Mr. President, I guess could you explain why we need it? Maybe I didn't hear that the first time when you told us about this. I'd like to know the reason why and why it's a good thing. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further question. Senator Larson.
Mr. President, thank you. I don't know if it's a question or not, but we had some time limit for second reading amendments was Sunday at like noon. And how does that work with what this is?
Senator Rothfuss. I can follow up if I need to.
Thanks, Mr. President. Mr. President, address some of those from the Rules Committee, and it pretty much summarized as a who, what, where, why, when, how, so I'll try and get to all of those questions. But regarding the who is exempt from it, that's the last clause. This rule shall not apply to amendments submitted pursuant to Joint Rule 14-1 M Romanet 3. So when you pull that up, it has to do with amendments to mirror budget bills. Only the following amendments shall be submitted to the legislative staff for preparation on the day third reading of a mirror budget bill is to begin in the first House. Amendments to correct errors in previously adopted amendments and amendments sponsored by the chairman of the Standing Appropriations Committee or his designee. And again, that's in joint rule, so take into consideration that's now, and if you don't like that last piece, it's already in the joint rule. It has been a point of contention in the past, but believe me, that's there now. As far as the next question about why are we doing this now, honestly, there was just discussion about when we should set the deadline. And that was a consideration, is when we should have a cutoff from the purpose of informing the public, from the purpose of ensuring that staff has adequate time to get things done. And the discussion on the Rules Committee was, well, this is what the House has been doing for quite a while. It might not be the best solution, but it is the solution that they've chosen, and that is basically that you have to have your budget amendments numbered not less than 2 hours prior to gaveling it. And so this is a mirror of what the House has done for quite a while, as I understand it. The justification is exactly what I said to the good senator from Sweetwater County. This provides clarity for the timing and prevents dropping a budget amendment, which is currently in order, right up until the section where it's open. You could literally number a budget amendment moments before it's coming to the section of the budget that is relevant and germane, and that could be the first public notice available to it, and that's the reason. And then, again, the question here, do we have to do this now, or is this for the next session? The idea was trying to resolve it for now, resolve it for how would we set a timeline today. We don't have to adopt this today. Again, that would largely be set then by a rule of the presiding officer, making a decision that would be appealable to the chamber. The discussion was, though, we don't have a policy at all in the Senate. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a policy and had a debate in the Senate? This is that debate. So if the body doesn't feel that this is an adequate rule or wants more time, honestly defeat it. We'll come back and we'll do it for the next session. That's fine. That's reasonable. If you want to take a vote on it now, and if you like this rule, I think it's a very reasonable rule since we lack one. And this is in good order as the House has done it before, then I'd encourage the body to support it. As noted by the President, it does take a 2/3 of this chamber majority. And we'll be coming back next time still to revisit rules regardless of our actions today. So I hope that answers all the questions, Mr. President. And I do believe, as I was looking over there giving my speech, that we may want to pause this debate and welcome one of our good friends if you find that appropriate, Mr. President.
Without objection, we're going to pause this debate. Rule change, Senator Barrasso. Imagine that at the last minute. Folks, great honor and privilege to welcome my great friend, Senator John Barrasso, back to the Wyoming legislature. Prior to being elected to the U.S. Senate, I'll read the script, but I think all of you know it pretty much by heart. Prior to becoming elected to the U.S. Senate, he represented the people in Natrona County in the Wyoming State Senate from 2003 to 2007. I'm guessing he can point out his desk to you. He's the third ranking member in the Senate Republican leadership as chairman of the Senate Republican Conference and is a ranking member of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, pretty important to Wyoming. Please join me in welcoming Senator John Barrasso.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful to be home. And as you said, some things change, some things never do. Hi, Charlie. I want to start by just thanking all of you and Ed Cooper in particular for the amazing turnout for Bobby's services. I mean, Ed got there before I did. I mean, thank you. And I saw so many of you there, and I know the road was closed from Shoshone, so people couldn't get over, and the weather was terrible. I think, Dan, you texted me, you were stopping Shoshone. Tim couldn't make it. I heard from people on both sides of the aisle were there. Thank you, Chris, for being there. She deserved it. People, they loved her, they tolerate me. That's what she used to always say. And the Star Tribune was going to do a big piece on this, and they wanted a family photo that they could print. So they did a piece 2 days after the funeral, and it was wife, mother, leader, and friend. And the picture that I sent as the family photo was January of 2003, right out that door when I was getting sworn into the state Senate. It meant that much to me. That is the way I view our family, our service to the state of Wyoming, and that's the way I think about things. And she's just been a remarkable woman and the love of my life, and I'm very grateful, but I'm very, very grateful for all of you who have attended. I was thinking of, I think, Charlie, did Chuck Townsend sit next to you? I was thinking about his services, and they were in Newcastle. And remember, legislatures went, well, the funeral home that was doing the service was out of South Dakota, and they didn't kind of recognize too many of the people. So I walked in, I had a suit on, I was a US Senator by then, and I said, the woman came up to me and she said, friend or government? Well, they had an area roped off for government to keep them kind of isolated from the people of Newcastle. But when I heard what Ed was doing, I said, I want every legislator who comes to be seated with the family, because it's our family. So I was so grateful that so many of you were there for that. I also want to say the fight continues in Washington. Harriet and Cynthia and I are in a fight against a Washington that doesn't understand us, our way of life. Our job is to continue to tell them that they are wrong and Wyoming is right. And the big fight right now is about energy. You may have seen that the president has said, we're not going to export any liquefied natural gas. We're going to stop it. So the New York Times reported why. Well, the president's team met with a 25-year-old TikTok influencer who said, if you want the youth vote, you got to stop exporting liquefied natural gas. Regardless of the impact on the economy, regardless of the fact that our allies overseas need it, regardless of the impact of jobs here, that's what we're up against with this administration. It is now a shirts and skins game. And I had a press conference with all the other members of the Republicans on the Energy Committee to talk about this and why it's been bad. And one of the liberal members of the press asked the question, well, isn't it true that you just, you're the fossil fuel people run your state? I said, no. Let me tell you about fossil fuels in the state of Wyoming. You have a bunch of students up here. Those are WWAMI students. There's 20 of them, first-year students right now. I'll talk about them a little more. They're the beneficiary of our energy. Some of them have had Hathaway scholarships as well. One young woman I had lunch with them said, the state of Wyoming has been investing in me from the beginning. College, medical school, you bet I want to come back to Wyoming to practice. That's what it's all about. I mean, these are investments we make in our state, and we do the most responsible energy development. You want economic development, energy approaches to that, energy-driven, and we're going to continue to do that. That's what is strong for our state. It's good for our jobs, it's good for our economy, and it's good for our future. And that's why I'm glad all the students are up here to look and watch. And I know, Stacy, you had, and Evie, you had lunch with them and joined us at lunch a little earlier today. I mean, that's what it's all about. And it's about great health care for the future. Jim and Bill know that a couple of weeks ago I needed some emergency surgery on a Sunday night. I was so happy of two things. One is that I was in Wyoming when it happened, and my surgeon is in this booklet that they just put out, Wyoming WWAMI Physicians. These are people trained through WWAMI from Wyoming who are back here practicing. And there he is. He went, born in Laramie, Casper for high school, Washington State for medical school through WWAMI, Stanford for his surgical residency, Harvard for advanced training, back to his Casper, Wyoming hometown where he went to high school, and he is there when the people of Wyoming need him. That's what this is all about. And someone in the back said, I see you just got back from Africa. And I did. I was in Djibouti. We have 140 members of our Wyoming National Guard, our Air Guard in Djibouti. They're 10 time zones away. Missed Christmas. Hope to be home back again next month. It's a real hot spot right now in the globe because the Houthis are firing from Yemen into the ships that are trying to go from the Gulf of Aden up into the Red Sea to the Suez Canal. It's such a hot spot. One of the soldiers said, I kind of miss the cold Wyoming winters. I mean, that's a hot spot. And they're away, their families are away, but one of these medical students was in Djibouti last year, and I want Brandy Carrera to stand up. She's up there. I think she's up there. Are you still up there, Brandy? She's one of our Air National Guardsmen, now a WWAMI student, and she is there protecting our country, keeping us safe, keeping us free. This is total commitment to the state of Wyoming and to the America that we know and love. So that's what we're here for. That's what we're going to continue to do. That's what we're continuing to fight for. And I just say, thank you for welcoming me home. It's great to be home. And to me, home is that desk right there where you're sitting, John. I sat behind Delane Roberts. He was up here, and I remember Delane Roberts. Many of you do. So I walk in. This is the beauty of Wyoming. I walk into the Capitol. State Patrolman walks over, says, R. Roberts. It's Delane's grandson, Remington Roberts, down there guarding us. The legacy continues. That's Wyoming. Thanks for all you do for the state, for the people of this great state, for the future of the state, which is what the legislature is all about. God bless you. God bless Wyoming. God bless these United States of America. Thanks so much for letting me join you today.
Senator Barrasso, a huge, huge thank you for all you've done to Wyoming, and we can't wait to see what you do for us going forward. Okay, we're back on to the amendment again. Well, we're not finished up here. What? Oh, whammy. Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, Senator Barrasso, I should have just given him the list and let him introduce our students. He does such a good job. But, ladies and gentlemen, the 2023 WWAMI students are here. They had lunch with some of you. Some of the committees still had meetings, but I think it's fair that we introduce them. I'll read out their first name because some of their last names I'm not going to get correct. Just being honest with you. And I may not get your first names right, but I'm going to introduce them by first name. As I introduce you and your hometown, just stand, and then we'll welcome you all as when I get to the end. So, and this may not be in alphabetical order. So first, Chantel from Worland, Quentin from Sheridan, Bradford from Story, Wyoming, Brandy from Laramie, Annalise from Grable, Sabrina, Pinedale, Dean from Casper, Clara from Sheridan, Raphael from Laramie, An from Cheyenne, Emma from Lander, Caden Powell, Say from Laramie, if I said it wrong, I apologize, Aaron from Cody, Riley from Gillette, Matthew from Burlington, Wyoming, Hiram from Buffalo, Tatiana from Casper, Victoria from Gillette, and Anna from Green River. Ladies and gentlemen, this is WWAMI Education Program 2023. Welcome them to the Wyoming Senate.
Hear, hear.
And Mr. President, there's probably some staff and faculty and other folks up there. Thank you for the work you do. Welcome as well. Thank you very much.
Senator French.
Privilege of the floor.
Granted.
I'd like to introduce everybody to somebody that's very special to me, my niece, April.
Welcome, April. Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. President. Privilege, it just seems to be the
Granted.
time. Members of the Senate, I'd like to introduce a friend of mine from Fremont County, Mitch Benson, who's here. He asked me a couple weeks ago, what's going on in the state legislature? And he's a citizen, he's a good man. I invited him to come here to talk to legislators, both on the Senate and the House side. He's someone I work for, and I would ask that you give a Senate welcome to Mr. Mitch Benson, please.
Any further? So we're back on the amendment. I had one short one. I'm going to speak from the desk. I don't normally do this, but it's more explanation. Talking about why we did it, and a good part of it's for staff reasons, is tomorrow we're going to have a long list of amendments. And depending on how they number them and how they do them, it means our staff has to be here before light in the morning, and they finish the same time, whatever we do, or after putting them together. And so it leaves them with an incredible day. And I can tell you that was why I did the Sunday deadline before, is I have great compassion for all the people that work both out front and in back. We think we put in long days. They come before we do and leave after we leave. And I think we really need to look at respecting them. So that's kind of my pitch on it. We can take any more comments and then we'll bring this to a vote. It'll be a 2/3 vote. Thank you. Would anyone like me to read it again? Okay. Call the roll, please.
Roll call. Amendment SR 0002, creating Senate Rule 11-7. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? No. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? No. Ellis? Aye. French? No. Furphy? Aye. Garou? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? No. Ide? No. Jones? No. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? No. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? No. President Driscoll? Aye. Closing vote? Closing. Vote closed. On the amendment, 17 aye, 14 no.
Amendment has failed. You'll be able to run amendments right up to the minute on the floor. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, we're at that order of business.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate resolve itself into committee of the whole.
Heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Welcome, Senator. Motion is passed. Welcome, Senator Schuler.
His chair's a little low, or he's kind of tall, I guess, so. Committee of the whole, come to order. The next bill, hopefully we'll get through a few more today, right? That we're going to take a look at will be Senate File 32, Implementations on Psychoactive Substances.
Senate File 32, Hemp Limitations on Psychoactive Substances, an act relating to hemp production and controlled substances, sponsored by the Judiciary Committee, was referred to Committee Number 1, which turned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Cooper, Furphy, and Landon. No, Senators Case and Schuler. Senator Landon, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Landon?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would move that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with a due pass recommendation on Senate File 32, hemp limitations on psychoactive substances. For a rundown on the bill, I'd ask that you call on Senator Cooper.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, I'd like to suggest that our good chairman did a wonderful job presenting this bill yesterday. I'd rather she was up here doing this, but I kind of put her on the spot and she did a very good job. One of the first things we need to consider with this bill is this is the hemp side of this issue. We have an issue going on in Wyoming, up in northwest Wyoming. We had some kids a year or so ago that were actually hospitalized from smoking some of these synthetic products. And we've got an issue with some of it being introduced into hemp products as they hit the market. Now, we've got a really important growing hemp industry in Wyoming, and we need to protect those folks. They're doing a good job of trying to come up with a new cash crop for us, and we've got a few bad actors around, and we want to make sure that they're not here in Wyoming. So again, we have a big problem across the state, a little bit in the production processing side, but mostly on the retail side. This bill does not cover the retail side, just only covers production and processing. So with that said, talk about the bill for just a second. Page 1's the introduction. Page 2 is primarily definitions. And then we get into the bill itself. If you go to page 3, it talks about the tetrahydrocannabinol is the psychotic component of the cannabis plant. I'm out of my element here, but I don't know much about these materials other than that would be the THC part of it. Psychoactive analogs are part of the THC. And anyway, but it goes on through the descriptions or the definitions. So on to page 4, line 2 through line 12 is what we need to really visit about for a second. No person or licensee shall produce, process, or sell hemp or hemp products containing more than 0.3% THC by dry weight. We already knew that. They may not add, alter, insert, or otherwise include any synthetic substance into the hemp or hemp products produced, processed, or sold in accordance with this chapter. So that's what we're trying to do is prevent the introduction of these psychotics, these synthetic psychotics into the hemp, and then it goes out into the marketplace from there. So trying to do this while protecting our hemp farmers is a big part of this. It establishes some fines and some consequences of that behavior. And primarily, the next consequence is any person who violates, this would be page 6, line 10, any person who violates this chapter by producing, processing, or selling hemp or hemp products shall be ineligible for licensure under this chapter. So they lose a license to produce if they are introducing the synthetics into the hemp. That's pretty much the bill, folks. That's what we're trying to do, is prevent the synthetic substances from being introduced while we're maintaining our integrity of our hemp farmers. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Discussion? Questions? Senator Landon?
So, Madam Chairman, thank you. Just a couple more thoughts. Really appreciate the senator walking us through this bill. This was another of the interim topics, fellow senators, taken up by your Judiciary Committee. Another tough lift, to be honest, but it's one that I think is absolutely imperative for a couple reasons. First, I don't think the legislature had in mind what has developed surrounding this product. I think back 3 or 4 years ago when we passed legislation to allow for the production of this plant, it meant a lot to our agriculture community, and it was something that I think that most of us got behind and felt pretty good about. What's happened now is that we've had this proliferation of not only the stores that sell product, but this proliferation of product within those stores that, Madam Chairman, we don't know what's even in them. And as pointed out, we've anecdotally had stories come to us that people have really gotten in trouble with some of this. And so this is a bill that begins to get a handle on it. It probably, I'll just submit to you, it probably isn't the end of all things. We're going to have to keep an eye on this and continue to monitor. But I hope you'll support the bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Rothfuss?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have a couple of questions because I was one of the original co-sponsors of the hemp legislation, and I thought that was an exceptional piece of legislation that was put together to try and enable a market in the state of Wyoming. And then what we saw seemingly 15 minutes after we passed that legislation was criminal action against one of the producers that apparently had some small amount of hemp somewhere that might have been slightly over 0.3%. And then, you know, lightning and thunder rained down upon that particular farm. And Madam Chairman, clearly that was not the intent of the legislation. And I guess my concern here, my question to the committee, I think the committee is trying to provide a little more clarity to prevent that from happening again and to protect this industry. But what I don't understand is how the legislation where we add what I would call more complexity to the legislation by creating the possibility of losing your license over including synthetics is going to prevent something like that from happening again, where with the definition of synthetics, you have quite a range of materials. It's any other psychoactive material. If we have an overzealous law enforcement experience, once again, it seems like there's even more room to find, to potentially prosecute. So what are the protections in here for those farmers is question number one. And question number two is just a serious reconsideration of that 0.3%. Most of the states around us don't even have criminalization at this point in time. You can have 27% and you're just fine. It's just not hemp anymore. It seems to be my recollection that 0.3% was from a Federal Agricultural Act that allowed for hemp from a federal standpoint under certain ag programs. Has there been any discussion on perhaps how we can find ways to remedy the additional overzealous engagement by law enforcement to prosecute agricultural production of hemp, in addition to trying to provide this type of clarification? So those are my two, and I hope there's some answers to that, because again, I want to support this industry, and I'm not seeing how this is providing additional protections.
Senator French?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just couldn't help myself, had to comment. You know, these producers of hemp, there were some up in the Powell area. I don't know, I haven't seen any this year around there. There might be towards Bighorn County, I don't know. But these crops are very valuable, and they don't want the THC or whatever in it to be very high, because they could potentially lose hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. Their biggest gripe relayed to me was they had a 50-acre field of hemp, and everybody in their Doug that smoked the marijuana were out in there at night putting marijuana plants all through their field. And so as it grew, and then that put their crop at total risk, because they couldn't go through, you know, as that stuff grew, they couldn't go through a 50-acre field and try to find it. So they go and harvest it, would chop it and put it, and then the inspectors say, oh, it's over X amount, and it's rejected. So, you know, there's a lot to this story, but yeah, we gotta protect those hemp producers wherever they're out in the state. Thank you. And by the way, when you drive by that 50-acre field, it really smelled.
Senator Landon?
Yeah, but Madam Chairman, you get a wildland fire and people gather from miles around downwind, right? It's pretty tough to follow the senator in the middle of the room. That's good storytelling right there. But in all seriousness, I'll try to get a little bit of information back to my desk mate with respect to the protection for the farmers. You know, we didn't have a lot of conversation about that. in committee. We would just hope that this sets the goalposts and people would play by some rules. I don't think law enforcement is out to get these producers, and I think we need to share stories like that to help make sure that people know that there's some nefarious things that can tip the balance. We don't want that either. But I do think that we have to at least set the goalposts, which is what this bill does. Outlines the fact that we want this product to, and point 3, absolutely, that's federal legislation that came down to authorize. So we stayed with that, and that's really, my understanding is if you just grow a hemp plant, that's about what it's gonna have in it. I'm with the senator from the Bighorn Basin. I even said so in committee. I think the last thing that I might have smoked was one of those filtered cigarettes that the cowboys always promoted, you know? That was back in 74 or something. So I am not an expert, but I am glad to chase down any information somebody might need. So thank you, Madam Chairman.
Further discussion? Okay. I'm sensing you might be ready for the question. Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Landon's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 32 do pass, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay. Senate File 32 has passed. Oops, there we go. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 36.
Senate File 36, Uniform Child Abduction Prevention Act, sponsored by the Judiciary Committee, an act relating to domestic relations, was referred to Committee Number 1, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Case, Cooper, Furphy, Landon, and Schuler. Senator Landon, Chairman.
For the reading of the bill, what's your pleasure, Senator Landon?
Madam Chairman, I would move that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with a do pass recommendation on Senate File 36, Uniform Child Abduction Prevention Act. Madam Chairman, this is another product from your Judiciary Committee, which took up this particular issue at the direction of our Attorney General, and it dates, truthfully, the genesis of this bill dates to our first meeting, which was up in the northern part of the state, where the Vice President hangs out. We had a lot of testimony that day, including from a family in the northwest part of the state, over by the national park, and really kind of a heart-wrenching story about a young child that was taken across state lines to another community up north. The family, which included the divorced wife and parents, not to get into all the details, but it was quite heart-wrenching. And so the question was asked on the Judiciary Committee, what might be done about circumstances like this? We were informed by some of our good attorneys in the state that that such an act existed, and quite frankly, that's why this bill is here. We learned of the Uniform Child Abduction Prevention Act, and I'll read you just a little bit about that effort. It's a nationwide effort. We've got about 16 states now that have adopted this legislation in an effort, Madam Chairman, to try to ease the burden of cross-state lines and other jurisdictions and all the difficulties that surround these family law matters. The Uniform Law Commission drafted this act to provide states with a tool to deter domestic and international child abductions by parents and persons acting on their behalf. This act is intended to complement another act. As of March 2023, 14 states, and now we know that 16 states have adopted this particular act. In addition, we have 4 states introducing the legislation this, along with Wyoming. So this act is really aimed at trying to allow for better communication and the better ability of states to work together in circumstances like this. Let me quickly walk you into the bill, and then I'll try to get to questions. These uniform acts, by the way, senators, they tend to be fairly long. Please don't allow that to buffalo you at all. I think that's because they touch on several of our titles, several pieces of our statutes in order to get it all taken care of. Pages 2 through 4, that's the definitions of the bill. Page 4 is the court communications piece. Pages 4 and 5, the prevention measures that the court may take when awareness of a situation occurs and folks come to the court. Page 5 is the court jurisdiction. Page 6 is what a petition is all about and what is required to petition a court if there's a child that is in jeopardy. Pages 7 through 12, the factors to determine the risk of an abduction. And pages 13 through 20, all of the considerations that the court, if a court issues an order, that it must take up. That's really the heart of the bill. Page 7 all the way through 20, and that's that long list of things that must be considered and must be taken into account. If after all of that, all of the considerations that the court decides to issue an order, Madam Chairman, that's when law enforcement would be called in. There's a law enforcement piece on pages 20 through 23. That's when a warrant would go out and physical custody of a child would be taken. So that's when the action takes place. Page 23, the duration of the order, and that pretty much gets you through this act, fellow senators. I'm going to stop there. I hope that that gives you an adequate overview so that you know what this bill is all about. And I'm sure that hopefully members of the Judiciary Committee can back me up a little bit, but we'd be glad to try to answer any questions. Thank you.
Questions? Discussion? Are you ready for the question?
Question.
Okay. All those in favor of Senator Landon's motion to, that when the committee of the whole rises to report, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 32 do pass, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay, Senate File 32 has passed. All right, the next, excuse me. Excuse me, you're right, 36, we already passed 32. Let me state that again. Senate File 36 has passed the committee of the whole. Thanks for that. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 22. The reading clerk, read that.
Senate File 22, Public Service Commission, Electricity Reliability, an act relating to public utilities, sponsored by the Corporations Committee. Was referred to Committee Number 7, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Boner, Case, Landon, and Scott. Senator Case, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Case?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, that it do so with a due pass recommendation on Senate File 22, Public Service Commission, Electricity Reliability. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a product of your interim work of the Corporations Committee. It is trying to get at maintaining a reliable electric service as our electric system evolves and generation types change, and as we move forward. Your committee heard the bill. We approved it with a standing committee amendment, which I would ask to be read in at this time.
Senate File 22, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 2, line 16, delete.
Madam Chairwoman, I would move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 22. And I need a slight bit of leeway here because we passed this in committee, I believe it was Monday. And our good friends at the Wyoming Public Service Commission wanted to take a look at it and promised to get back with further modifications to the language. So if you'll note, I don't really mean to make reference to another amendment, but if we pass the Standing Committee amendment, there will be a subsequent amendment that I will offer. It's a Committee of the Whole amendment that incorporates the proposals from the Public Service Commission. In the end, we get to the place we need to be, and it's a little bit of a trust me if you don't mind, or we can go in detail through the Standing Committee amendment, but we're going to change the Standing Committee amendment after we adopt it. So anyway, the Standing Committee amendment deals with some of the language. And for example, on page 2, line 16, or that Romanet A, I'm sorry, it's capital A under Romanet 5, not later than December 15, 2024, establish baseline standards for electric reliability related to adequate, reliable. The Standing Committee amendment deletes the word dispatchable, so it says adequate, reliable power in Wyoming with adequate power to ensure reliability. The standards established under this subparagraph may include limits on outages, etc. And then further, the Standing Committee amendment goes into capital D on page 3, and there's a deletion of lines 4, 5, 6, and 7. The end result is that the new language would be, in considering generation facilities for inclusion in a utilities investment on which the utility is entitled to earn a rate of return, the Commission may disallow the inclusion of some or all of the investment associated with non-dispatchable resources if those resources do not operate as projected and cause a failure to comply with reliability standards. Finally, the Standing Committee amendment makes this effective immediately. That's the Standing Committee amendment. It does make it a better bill, but I'm sorry to say that we're going to mess with some of this in the next amendment, but it'd probably be easiest if we just dispose of the Standing Committee amendment and pass it.
Any further discussion on the amendment?
Question?
Okay, question. Question's been called. All those in favor of Senator Case's motion to adopt the Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 22, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no? Okay, that has passed. The next amendment. Go ahead, Senator.
Yes, could we have the next amendment read in? It's Committee of Whole Amendment Number 1.
Senate File 22, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1, page 2, line 16, delete.
Madam Chairwoman, I would move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 22. And the net effect of this amendment plus the Standing Committee amendment gets us to where we want to be. I do note that the Public Service Commission brought the amendment this morning, and we did talk about it in general. Obviously, the bill had already left the committee's possession, so this was our only remedy. We were trying to be very timely. So, but with the Standing Committee amendment, Madam Chairwoman, we sort of return to some of the old language on page 2, that capital under Romanet 5, that paragraph A will now read, not later than December 15, 2024, establish baseline standards for electric reliability to ensure adequate, reliable, dispatchable power in Wyoming. The standards established under this paragraph may include limits on outages and shall. And then on page 3, this makes the new language would be, this deletes the Standing Committee amendment to page 3, line 7. And so we still have the struck language in there, but it will now read, in considering generation facilities for inclusion in a utilities investment on which the utility is entitled to earn a rate of return, the Commission may disallow the inclusion of some or all of the investment associated with non-dispatchable resources if those resources do not operate as projected and require the utility to rely on more expensive sources of generation or materially contribute to a failure to comply with reliability standards. That's the final read with the Committee of the Whole amendment. The Commission did improve it, and I would ask you to adopt it.
Any further discussion on the Committee of the Whole amendment? Okay, are you ready for the question?
Question.
Okay, all those in favor of Senator Case's motion to adopt the Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 22, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Okay, Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 22 is passed. Back on the bill.
Happy to answer any questions. Question on the bill if there are none.
Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is directed to the chairman. I would like to know how all this is done, the dispatching, how to make sure that the energy is reliable. It just it boggles my mind how, listening to it, I'd like to have a little bit more information. Thank you.
Senator Case.
Well, Madam Chairwoman, you know, the Commission has a tough job. This is a very complicated industry that is changing very rapidly. And it's evolving. It's evolving from being a fossil fuel-based electric sources to being a renewables-based electric sources. The Commission and electric utilities are the largest capital investment utilities that essentially connect to your house. So it's the biggest, hugest investment in our country of utility services, more than water, more than telecommunications. I used to say that when we regulated telephone companies, the electric utilities were like 10 telephone companies. They were that big. There was that in ratio of their investments. They're huge decisions to build and figure out how we're going to supply reliable power. And the equipment and the commitment by the utility and its stockholders to providing that service is a very long-term commitment. These assets have long lives. It's not unusual for transmission assets to be 50 years old. It's not, some generation facilities in Wyoming are older than that. And so the idea is, how do you make this system work as you try to plan for this investment, give the right signals, encourage the right kind of investment, and be prepared as the system grows or as the new types of generation come online. And it's complicated. Then you add one more level of complication in the case of our Wyoming utilities, is they're not just in Wyoming. The large utility that serves a lot of our communities, it's the largest utility in Wyoming. It also serves 5 other states. And we're actually only a small percentage of that utility, 15% if you want to be precise. But a big significant percentage of the generation is located here. The Commission operates under the Public Utility Act. It's a very long-standing law that has legal precedents that go back into the mid to late 1800s. And it's been updated over the years. And in that, it's a process that's established. You've all heard of the rate case, because we had a rate case this summer, and you kind of got a feel for how that is. How that is done is contained in the law. But there's many other aspects of the Commission's job that doesn't involve just approving rates. They have to approve any investments as we go forward, Madam Chairwoman. They, even before any investments are made, utilities now come in and file what they're planning, how they're planning to serve load down the future. We have a bill in this very legislature that deals with putting some more teeth into that planning process. And maybe in some cases adding, another bill adds a fact that there might need to be more competitive bidding. So that starts way early on before you ever think about building this or devoting it to the public use and bringing it into the rate case. How well the system performs is a big, big deal. And there are standards established by the industry. There are safety standards established by other organizations. And there are standards that need to be met in order to have acceptable performance of the utilities functioning to get rate recovery. That's what this bill deals with, is to have them consider the standards with respect to how reliable the system is. And we're directing the commission to maintain high levels of reliability and to disallow recovery by the utility in situations where they have compromised reliability. How well will this work? I can't tell you exactly. It's a step in the right direction. It tells us what we're interested in, but it's a very complicated job. And the commission is small. They work very hard, and they will have a job to do to oversee the implementation of this bill and the other bills that we've passed. But the goal is to make sure that we give them the tools so that they can make disallowances with respect to reliability. And so I know that's superficial in a way. I'm doing the best I can. I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Senator Scott?
And Madam Chairman, tagging on to that, when you start talking about reliability, you've got two separate sets of issues. One is the traditional sort of thing. Something goes wrong with the local distribution system. There's a car accident that knocks the power pole down. The ranch dogs chase a coon up a power pole, and it sits on the transformer and gets fried and shorts the system out. That sort of thing we've always dealt with. It's more of a problem, frankly, in the rural areas. Those of you who live in town are somewhat protected by the network effects. But that's typically short-term, relatively short-term outages, local transmission things. And then we're developing an issue with reliability because the renewables, we can't control having them running when we really need them. You need a certain amount of what they call dispatchable power that we can turn on and off. And that's a good deal of what this bill is dealing with, and why it's important to give the commission the extra authority to deal with investments, because we're under pressure from, particularly with the large utility in the state that also serves out West Coast states that are determined to go all renewable whether it works or not. And there's a potential for some very expensive investments that don't work very well, and the technologies and the process is evolving. So this is going to be an area of concern where the commission needs tools, and we need to watch the commission, because they have to act as a watchdog for us, controlling the utilities. We have to deal with both us and the utility commissions in their West Coast markets that aren't fully reasonable. So it's going to be a difficult situation with quite a bit of money at stake and quite a bit of potential for reliability problems for the next goodness knows how many years.
Any further discussion on the bill? You ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Case's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 22 do pass, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay, Senate File 22 has passed the committee of the whole. Next bill for our consideration, excuse me. Did you have?
Privilege of the floor.
Yes, you may.
I would really like to introduce some friends of ours, but I want to start with an apology because last night we got out so late that we missed a very important thing that would have been good for us to go. We were invited by the Northern Arapaho Business Council and the Northern Arapaho tribe to attend a function last night. We were here until after 11 o'clock. It was quite a bit after, actually, and we are very sorry. They even went to the trouble, Madam Chairwoman, of extending the hours. They paid for more rent and kept the food available, and they really did. And so they extended it at least by another hour, and that was very heartfelt. But join me in welcoming Lee Spoonhunter, who's the co-chair of the Northern Arapaho Business Council, and Councilwoman Teresa Chase, right here. Lee Spoonhunter, the chairman, is also around, but I think he had another appointment, but you'll see him. And we have their Attorney General right there. She's, so welcome, and thank you so much for last night.
Thank you.
Well, Travis McNiven also is their representative down here. He's from our home, so wave to Travis as well.
Yep. Thanks again for the effort. We appreciate you. Sorry we couldn't make it. Moving on. Next bill for our consideration is Senate Joint Resolution 2. Reading clerk, read the bill.
Senate Joint Resolution 2, Foreign Adversaries Prohibited Property Ownership, sponsored by Senator Steinmetz. A joint resolution prohibiting foreign adversaries and specified foreign entities from owning property. It was referred to Committee Number 8, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brennan, Furphy, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Boner, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Boner?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation on Senate Joint Resolution 2, Foreign Adversaries Prohibited Property Ownership. Looking for the sponsor of the bill. Do not see her on the floor. Whenever, there she is. Okay. So I'll defer to my colleague from Goshen County.
Say that very slowly.
All right, I got my
Senator Steinmetz, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I will get my mic up and thank you very much. You went faster than you did last night, faster than I expected you to. So that's always good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman of the Transportation Committee, for hearing this bill. This is Foreign Adversaries Prohibited Property Ownership. This is a constitutional amendment that would be presented to the citizens of the state of Wyoming. Currently, right now, in our Constitution, it says that no distinction shall ever be made by law between resident aliens and citizens as to the possession, taxation, enjoyment, and descent of property. Madam Chairman, so this would just put an exception to that should the voters approve it that says foreign adversaries of the United States and prohibited foreign entities as determined by the legislature that pose a threat to national security shall not be entitled to possession, enjoyment, or descent of property, including any interest in real property or real estate, and any surface, subsurface, airspace, or mineral interest in the state. And Madam Chairman, the definition of foreign adversaries is China, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Russia, and Venezuela. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Discussion? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, that's a definition that is obviously subject to change, and I guess the concern I have is with the idea that the legislature can deem that a foreign nation poses a threat to national security. And I'm curious if there's any historical precedent to that in any other states where a state has had the capacity to determine enemies of the United States. which is exactly what this says, right? Foreign adversaries of the United States and prohibited entities as determined by the legislature. So the idea, I guess, that a legislature of a state has the capacity to determine the enemies of the United States, or even the enemies of Wyoming, is a little disconcerting. And I'm not entirely sure what the consequences of that all by itself are. This is almost a conversation aside from the property ownership specifically, as to whether or not we would want to exclude or allow property ownership from those that we deem to be enemies, simply the idea that we are capable of deeming something an enemy, someone an enemy, as another country. So going back into statute and rewriting statute to deem our good friends, the Canadians to the north, an enemy, as an example. I mean, obviously they're not. That's why I'm using them as an example. Great country, we have incredible trade relationships with it, but would it then be allowable with this constitutional amendment that if a majority of both chambers voting separately and the governor's signature so ordered it, we could effectively qualify the country to the great white north of us as a enemy of the state of Wyoming, and therefore all of those citizens of that country would be unable to purchase property in the state? Is that an appropriate interpretation? That's kind of the first question. The second gets to the ex post facto conversation type concepts that we previously had about ownership of existing land, where I believe the implication of this would be a rather significant takings if passed, even as it is right now, without any change to what's in statute, because it's my assumption that there would be, Madam Chairman, substantial current foreign ownership of properties, and would this then effectuate a takings of all of that property that is owned currently by any member of a foreign country that is on that list? And then the third and final is the idea that these are foreign entities specifically. I guess my question at that point, and this may be clear from the statute, but I'm not entirely sure, would residents of those foreign countries be deemed to be foreign adversaries if they were on the adversary list? Would Wyoming domiciled corporations set up by those foreign adversaries be effective in circumventing this language? And how would that play out? So I guess I've got at least 3 questions there, but I'm a little bit curious how this would play out. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'll take a crack at those questions. Hopefully I'll remember all of them, but I'd just like to point out that, this is a constitutional amendment. We're not going to get into the important details that are brought up by the minority floor leader necessarily within the context of this constitutional amendment. This simply makes it clear that what some of the bills you will probably see in the coming days would make sure that they'd be allowed to operate under this Constitution. I point out, so it's starting the first one as far as capabilities. Answer is no. Of course, the state does not necessarily possess the capabilities to determine who's a foreign adversaries, and almost to the last question, what entity may be associated with that, adversarial state that is actually trying to do some harm to our national interests. But we do have relationships with our federal partners that could figure those out, that do have those resources and have it as their mission to do counterintelligence work, for example. The Department of Criminal Investigations has an ongoing relationship with federal agencies that do just that sort of work. So we'll have very detailed questions. I think that's useful. I appreciate the minority full leader for bringing those up, but really it's going to be having sound in the committee that not just this constitutional amendment, but 2 other bills that would really get in those sorts of details. I think those would be better placed when those bills come before us. So the way I read it, it doesn't just mention foreign adversaries. It also talks about specific entities. There's not necessarily, it doesn't obligate the legislature to say every citizen from say that country to our north is disallowed from owning property. It does not have to be that heavy a hand. There's far more tailored approaches that we can take, and there's more heavy-handed, more thorough approaches that we could take. The way I see it is this constitutional amendment simply poses a fundamental question to our constituents. Is this something that you want to allow the possibility for the legislature to do at some point to deal with the very real threats that we are facing? I'm not advocating for an overreaction, but there's very sophisticated actors out there who take advantage of our open society to produce outcomes which clearly threaten our way of life. So the threat's real. The considerations that the minority leader brought up are real. We don't want to overreact and threaten anybody's constitutional liberties, but this simply allows us to make that decision. This is a constitutional amendment.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. I think this is an extremely timely thing to be considering today. And it seems so appropriate to me because today's February 20th. Yesterday was February 19th, a very long day for all of us. But on February 19th, 1942, our President Roosevelt signed an executive order which led to the internment of Japanese people, mostly from the west coast of the United States. Looking back, those people were, they suffered greatly. One of those camps, one of the largest, was in Wyoming at Heart Mountain. It's a magnificent facility to review. As the course of their internment progressed, they lost all their property. They had no chance. They weren't able to own property. And yet they gave so much to America. The most decorated regiment in American history was made up of Japanese soldiers that mostly served in Italy, and I believe it was the 447th, but I'm not sure. I would hate to get that wrong. But so that's what we're talking about here. We were at war with Japan, and this is the way we took it out. I don't know if there's a lot of sidebars in this, but I think we're thinking of big companies that are state-directed, and that's how we're going to do our part to prevent subjugation, perhaps, by these foreign empires or what. But it's going to be difficult to accomplish. The People's Republic of China doesn't own anything in Wyoming. I guarantee you that. I guarantee you that their investment interests are in other corporations and things that you would have a hard time proving that is directed and an instrument of the state. Maybe we could do that, and maybe that's the purpose of this bill. But I'm worried about the slippery slope of this a bit. We could get very enthusiastic. In this legislature, we have talked about having the governor have his own army, $50 million for the legislature to pursue its own legal actions, and now the ability to call someone an enemy of the state and sever their rights to their property, like Franklin Roosevelt's executive order ended up doing to the Japanese. So this is where I get a caution. Breathe in a little bit here. If people own property in the state of Wyoming, or companies own property, or companies own our pore space, or companies own mineral rights, they can't take them away. They can't move that pore space and take it to China. They can't take it to Russia. It's here, and we can deal with it over time. If we become more adversarial, and I am worried about the state of the world, believe me. But if we become more adversarial, there will be tools to deal with that situation. And if they are using those assets now illegally, perhaps for espionage or for other purposes, that's a bad thing, but that's above our pay grade. We're not in the business of catching spies and determining what economic activities are enemies of the United States. That's kind of above the state of Wyoming legislature's pay grade. When the US government and events evolve in the world to create a state of war or something close to it, there will be tools. Tools come about very rapidly, like tools that were used to inter all these Japanese citizens, loyal American citizens, and do a horrible disservice to them. I urge caution.
Further discussion? All right. Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Boner's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with a recommendation that Senate Joint Resolution 2 pass. All those please say aye. Aye. Those who are opposed say no.
No.
Division. Okay, division's been called. All those that are in favor of Senate Joint Resolution 2, please stand.
This only has to be a majority. This vote is a majority.
All those opposed, please stand. That's okay. Okay. Senate Joint Resolution 2 has passed, Committee of the Whole. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 50.
Senate File 50, Unincorporated Nonprofit DAOs, an act relating to corporations, partnerships, and associations sponsored by the Blockchain Committee. It was referred to Committee Number 9, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Aye, Senators Cooper, Dockstader, Jones, and Rothfuss. Conflict, Senator Ellis. Senator Dockstader, Chairman.
For the reading of the bill, what is your pleasure? Not sure who's, oh, okay, there we go. Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Recommend that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, do so with favorable motion of the Senate file. And to explain the bill, Senator Ellis? Oh, Senator Rothfuss, sorry.
Thanks,
Senator
Madam
Rothfuss?
Chairman. But I'm willing to defer to Senator Ellis. No? Okay. Madam Chairman, Senate File 50, Unincorporated Nonprofit DAOs, is a work of the Blockchain Select Committee from the interim, and we spent quite a bit of time on this legislation trying to get this right. It is the first of its kind in the country. It's an exciting piece of legislation that has a lot of national and international interest, and I think this is probably the most important of the pieces of legislation that we worked on during the off-season to keep Wyoming set apart with regard to digital asset and blockchain technologies and financial technology innovation. So, Madam Chairman, this is a relatively long bill. You'll see that it's up around 45, 46 pages. I'm going to stay at a high level and I'll explain why. It's not a corporate structure, but it's in our corporation section of statutes based on corporate law and works to define the details of what you'll see on page 1 is going to be called a Wyoming Decentralized Unincorporated Nonprofit Association. That's called a DUNA. A DUNA, like tuna, but with a D. And a DUNA is a type of unincorporated structure that has become very popular and of significant interest for a few reasons that I'll go into ahead of walking through the bill and talking about what it does. So we already have in Wyoming statute the Uniform Unincorporated Nonprofit Act. That's called an UNA. And so that's been on the books for quite a few years, and a lot of the legislation or a lot of the statutory construction that's in this act is modeled after that through some copy and paste and then some further amendment. And the idea is that not all associations desire to be structured in a corporate way, to register with the state of Wyoming, to file taxes as for-profit entities, and there are some advantages, particularly now, for these DUNAs and UNAs that people are looking to take advantage of because of a couple of recent actions at the federal level. So, before I get into those actions, the key difference between our traditional UNA and this decentralized UNA is the idea that it would be similar to the Dow LLC that we enacted a few years back that has been incredibly popular. We've got over 500 Dow LLCs filed in the state of Wyoming, and we're certainly one of the central points for Dow LLC registrations in the country, and that too was first of its kind. But not all entities are interested in filing a for-profit corporation. So the Dow LLC meets those that are looking for the for-profit corporate filing, but what we see is a lot that are interested in not having a corporate structure, and that's because of what it does with regard to federal security law. If you have a distributed ledger technology ownership governance model, like a DAO, which means you're having some algorithmic management, you're having some automated management, and you have that with a for-profit entity, the SEC has been very hard on those corporate structures, and there's been a lot of scrutiny. So the interest then in the communities that want to build these decentralized autonomous organizations is, well, if we're not looking to have a profit to begin with, we just want an organization that provides for governance and provides for cooperation, then we can avoid the SEC if we don't have a corporate structure that requires a profit motivation. So it effectively takes it out of the SEC discussion. It takes it out of another discussion because the recent Corporate Transparency Act at the federal level puts quite a few additional requirements on reporting of all of your shareholders, participants, members in a for-profit entity, and those are incredibly challenging when you're using these digital asset and blockchain technologies and you have a decentralized structure of voting as you do with the DAO. So rather than having to comply with the incredibly strict federal Corporate Transparency Act, there is an interest in having this DUNA, which, since it's not an incorporated structure for profit, is exempt from it and therefore does not have to provide that reporting requirement. So, Madam Chairman, that's the background on why this legislation exists. I am going to go through it very quickly because that's probably already more than most of you want to hear about it, and 46 pages is quite long, but I'm happy to go into detail on any of the provisions. Most of this is, I guess, what you would call boilerplate language related to our statutory construction. Some of it is specific to the DUNA itself. So looking on page 2, traditional definitions, but on page 3, you've got a specific definition of a DUNA, and it provides for requirements that it consists of at least 100 members joined by mutual consent under an agreement. There's going to be a not-for-profit organization and operation. We have standard definitions elsewhere in statute on the bottom of page 3 and on to page 4. The governing principles that you see on page 4 are based on consensus algorithms through this decentralized autonomous organization. Page 5 is conformed statute for the DUNA. Page 6, smart contract definition, is what we have elsewhere, so that gets to how these DUNAs are algorithmically managed and governed. Page 6 onto page 7 is generally consistent with traditional corporate legislation for the unincorporated nonprofit association. Same thing onto page 8, talking about holding property, talking about how to deal with property, statement of authority for real property. Again, these are consistent with the traditional UNAs we have that are not algorithmically managed. Same things onto page 10 and 11, 12 and 13, similar language to what we have elsewhere in statute for UNA. On 14 and 15, again, conforming language to other statutory provisions that just go into how it would work for the DAO itself. Page 16 and 17, the same thing. Page 18 and on to 19 gets into a little bit of a difference, talking about the perpetual existence, dissolution, and continuation of existence, but it goes into the existence of this decentralized unincorporated nonprofit association and how that would be extinguished. Page 20, admission, suspension, dismissal, or expulsion of members, how that would be done, duties of members. On page 22 and page 23, member has no agency powers. The members are those that are cooperating specifically through this DUNA, and it basically provides them with protection from the actions of the other members unless they have some sort of enhanced established agreement for a specific member to have further responsibility. But that is the purpose, is to divide that responsibility. At the bottom of page 23 is an important provision. This gets to the member interests being transferable. It's an important part is the transferability of the assets of the members and the fact that you'll have perhaps thousands to 10,000s of members that are capable of transferring their governance. Methodology for approval of membership. Utilization on page 25 of distributed ledger technology. This gets into the fact that you'll have an underlying, often public ledger where this is being operated and disclosed. That is going to serve as the governance, as well as information about the system. Some of it may be partially public or private. You see in the Romanets ones regarding the governing principles for decentralized unincorporated nonprofit association, and this provides some provisions for how they should operate, adopting voting procedures. Other language, which is again similar to our DAO Act that we passed a couple of years ago. Same thing with page 27 on to page 28, developing of consensus algorithms for that voting and for the operation of it. On page 28, selection of administrators. An administrator is specifically through this language not a manager, it's a ministerial role, and there can be multiple roles within the organization to carry out the necessary services of the organization without taking on any special managerial powers or authorities. Page 30 on to page 31, similar language to what we have elsewhere, right to inspect records. 32 and 33 gets into indemnification for members, and again, consistent with other statutes. Winding up and termination, consistent with other statutes. Mergers goes on for quite a while and just gets into similar details to other statutes of how these would merge one another's and talking about surviving facilities. And then finally on page 46 is supplemental principles of law. So, Madam Chairman, again, this is effectively the nonprofit and unincorporated parallel to our previous DAO LLC Act. As I mentioned, there's tremendous interest. We had great involvement in the drafting of this legislation with participation from entities from all over the country, trying to give Wyoming, once again, a leg up. This is certainly a leadership position and the first of its kind in the country as far as doing a legislation. So there's a lot of interest in seeing this pass and in then beginning to start up and operate a lot of these types of joint endeavors in the state of Wyoming. So I'll stop there and answer any questions that the body may have, if there are any.
Senator Ellis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to let the body know, I will be declaring a conflict on this bill. A colleague of mine that I work with represents a company that has an interest in this, so to avoid the appearance of a conflict, I'll be voting conflict.
Senator Steinmetz?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a little bit more information. It's more on the concept of all of this than the actual bill. Just doing a little bit of research on this on the fly as we were looking at it. It looks like there's been some victims of hacks, some high-profile hacks, some security breaches. And I was wondering if it being a nonprofit, usually those are, sometimes they're charitable and things like that, is there any risk there? And if so, how much? And what has been the, I guess, the experience of the DAOs that we've set up here in the state of Wyoming? Thank you.
Senator Nethercott?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think the risk with this type of entity is the same as with any other type of entity. And so we know that there are some nonprofits that are created using our corporate laws, including those for nonprofits, that turn out to be acting nefariously or are unsuccessful, and there are consequences to that, as with any kind of corporate venture, for profit or for nonprofit. So I don't think that is distinguishable here. Generally, that's it. It doesn't, I don't think, invite any further exposure or risk than any other entity.
Further discussion? Senator Ralphus.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And to answer the other question about the experience with the DAOs that are in Wyoming already, they've been generally positive. Some of them haven't been very active, but those that have come into existence, we're looking at Wyoming to a large degree as a laboratory. And we're, I think, prospering here. But honestly, a lot of that prosperity started to fade away with the new federal act, which caused substantial problems. And then also with this concern about becoming a security. So their business model, and to be clear, the nonprofit side is not what we traditionally necessarily think about a nonprofit as a charitable organization where we're trying to raise towards some public good. It can be that. But the idea of nonprofit is really just that their mission isn't a profit mission, and therefore, if you are an owner or a member of it, that isn't a security interest. That's the biggest motivation, is the security aspect of it. That if you form an LLC or a corporation and everybody in here has a token that represents a share of it, all of a sudden right now, that is being interpreted as a security. A lot. And so we have an awful lot of entities that want to be able to engage this way, that are being contemplated potentially to be a security under the SEC, and then they would have to go through the entire registration process or face fines. To the extent that their business model doesn't necessarily require that they collectively search for a profit, they're looking for a way out of that. And if they designate as a nonprofit association, then they're free from it. As the good senator from Laramie County discussed, though, yes, everything has the potential for fraud, and we should always be worried about that and always be diligent about it. But there's nothing unique or special about this type of structure. I think that could lead to additional fraud, but I can assure you that we're having lots of discussions in the Blockchain Select Committee trying to make sure that we're providing those types of protections wherever possible. And you'll see transparency in this legislation, but at the same time, it's not necessarily transparency that greatly exceeds what we already have in statutes. Unincorporated associations, Madam Chairman, they're just that. They're things that you can voluntarily set up right now by yourself. And you don't have to ask anyone's permission in the state of Wyoming. Now, if you do it as a DAO, you can already kind of do that, but there's not any structure that provides any legal legitimacy to that. That's what this is doing. And we didn't want to necessarily go far, far beyond what's already in statute for other corporate structures, because again, that would be inappropriate. So we'll keep monitoring this, and certainly if anybody hears any concerns, I'd like to know those concerns. But I hope that answers all the questions. Happy to answer any more, Madam Chair.
Further discussion? Are you ready for the question? Okay, question being called. All those in favor of Senator Dockstetter's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 50 do pass, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no? No. Okay. Senate File 50 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 18. Will the reading clerk read the bill?
Senate File 18, Indian Child Welfare Act, Safe Haven Amendments, sponsored by the Tribal Relations Committee, an act relating to children. Was referred to Committee Number 6, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Ellis, Jones, Schuler. Excused, Senator Garou. Senator Schuler, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Ellis?
Madam Chair, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a due pass recommendation for Senate File 18. And colleagues, I'll explain this bill to you. As you'll recall, last session, we codified the Federal Indian Child Welfare Act in response to some concerns about what a pending Supreme Court case in the U.S. Supreme Court. As it turns out, however, that particular litigation resulted in the Federal Indian Child Welfare Act, or ICWA as we refer to it, staying wholly intact. However, as we were contemplating whether or not to codify it in state law, we also created an ICWA task force so that we could examine our state statutes and see if there were ways to improve on it and make it better. So with the Supreme Court's decision to uphold ICWA, we still went to work with the task, and before you, you'll see one of the ideas that emerged from our work group. Currently, we have a number of safe havens in the state of Wyoming, and these are places where if you are with a child and you're struggling, you can't take care of that child, and you need a safe place to take that child, you can take that child to a law enforcement office, a fire department, or a hospital. And when they accept custody of that child, they generally ask some questions, whether or not they're aware of if the child has any medical conditions so that they can address those issues and needs sooner on. And so in doing that, Madam Chair, we also thought it would make good sense for that provider to also provide, or the safe haven provider to ask whoever's relinquishing that child if they're aware if that child has a parent who might, or if whether or not that child has any tribal affiliation or Native American ancestry. Madam Chair, in practicing in this area, I think the most conflicts I see are when states are reluctant to follow the processes of ICWA, and then relationships are attached, and later on we see violations of ICWA, and that's what puts these children and families in really hard spots. So the sooner we ask for compliance and the sooner we can make contact with those tribes, the better. So that's what the language that you'll see on page 2 does, and then just a conforming amendment in the middle of page 2, and also allowing the Department of Family Services to promulgate rules. Madam Chair, I think the Department of Family Services provided some testimony on their involvement with enforcing safe haven provisions, and so this will require a little bit of training. But really, all it does is require those safe haven providers to ask a question so that we're following federal law and our state law. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but would urge your aye vote.
Discussion or questions? Okay. Seeing that you are ready for the question, and the question is being called, all those in favor of Senator Ellis's motion that the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 18 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay, Senate File 18 has passed Committee of the Whole. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 37.
Senate File 37, Indian Child Welfare Act Delinquency Amendments. Sponsored by the Tribal Relations Committee, an act relating to domestic relations, was referred to Committee Number 6, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Ellis, Jones, and Schuler. Excused, Senator Garou. Senator Schuler, Chairman.
For the reading of the bill, what is your pleasure, Senator Ellis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a recommendation that Senate File 37 do pass. Madam Chair, this is another bill that emerged from the ICWA task force, and this has to do with a provision in Wyoming law dealing with delinquencies. When we codified this Indian Child Welfare Act last year, Wyoming is a little unique in that our delinquency statutes are really merged in the same area of the law as termination of parental rights statutes. So as a result, it was included when we codified ICWA, but as we're seeing, this particular provision is causing some confusion because it currently doesn't exist in the federal requirement. Just recall, Senators, the purpose of ICWA is to look at any instance where a Native child might be separated from their parents, providing some due process protections to notify the tribe to see if they want to intervene in state court proceedings. And so we do that regularly, not just with our tribes in Wyoming and the members of their nations, the Northern Arapaho and Eastern Shoshone, but we do that with tribes located outside of Wyoming. So within Wyoming, when we have a delinquency action, which is a little different, and involves the delinquency action of, a youth, we do have agreements where we notify and work with our tribes, and we provide, have good cooperation in providing services to those delinquent youth. However, the Department of Family Services is running into some problems with what we codified last year. Specifically, when they contact tribes that are not located in Wyoming and out of state, the tribes are a little confused because that requirement doesn't exist in federal law. And so there are questions out there of whether or not we can transfer a case that happened wholly within the state of Wyoming, outside our borders, to a separate tribe for them to prosecute. And so that doesn't exist in federal law, it's inconsistent, and we just got a little too overbroad when we passed our codification last year. So what this would do, Madam Chair, it's a simple cleanup. Page 1 is a belt and suspenders approach to amend the session law, but effectively on page 2, it repeals the reference to juvenile delinquency matters. With that, there's also a standing committee amendment, and I'd ask that be read in.
Senate File 37, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 2, line 6, delete.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 37 and would ask the body to vote aye. Senators, this would change the effective date from July 1st to being effective immediately. In the committee, we'd felt that it didn't make sense to continue requiring something that was inconsistent and causing confusion for another 6 months until the month of July hits. So I would urge your adoption of the Standing Committee Amendment.
Any discussion on the Standing Committee Amendment number 1? Okay.
Question.
All those in favor of Senator Ellis's motion to accept the Standing Committee, Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File.
Point of order, it's Standing Committee Amendment.
Yeah, it is Standing Committee. Sorry, thank you for doing that. All those in favor of Senator Ellis's motion to adopt the Standing Committee, Amendment number 1 to Senate File 37, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. Okay, Standing Committee number 1 to Senate File 37 is passed. Back on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank the members of the task force who served on this committee. I want to thank this body for authorizing the creation of the task force. We looked at a lot of issues. Not all of them made it ultimately to you today, but there was good work, particularly by some members who are up in the gallery, and I just want to thank all of our members that took their time out to have these discussions and participate on that task force. Happy to answer any questions about the bill.
Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'd like to know from the bringer of the bill, I know she's worked on delinquency a lot in the past with education. Can she tell me what taking this out will do to the Wyoming residents? Thank you. What effect?
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that it shouldn't affect that. So if we have, well, let me explain it again. You might have a Native youth who has committed a crime. That's what triggers our juvenile delinquency statutes, and other states have a different structure of how they deal with those delinquency matters. Wyoming's a little atypical in how we do that. And so from what I understand, Madam Chair, because we have a cooperative agreement with our tribes, through our Department of Family Services, there's agreements already in place where they would notify our tribes of the delinquency matter. And if the tribe has, certain individuals who can help rehabilitate that particular juvenile, they're deployed. And so we've got this cooperation, but it exists because there's a contract between Department of Family Services for the state of Wyoming and for each of our tribes. The Northern Arapaho has a Department of Family Service, and so does Eastern Shoshone. So in those instances, those particular people should not be affected by this bill. However, if you have a Wyoming resident who happens to be a member of a separate tribe out of state, that tribe would simply not receive the notification of the delinquency matter, and that maintains the status quo. So what we did last year is we added additional requirement that is inconsistent with federal law and is creating confusion. I should add that this issue not only came up during our task force discussions, but I also met with members of the judiciary who have a group that looks at a variety of children's issues. We discussed what ICWA did, and this was actually brought to my attention. So because it's creating confusion with other tribes, I don't think we have the ability to transfer our criminal cases of things that happen inside Wyoming to a separate tribe out of state. It really is inconsistent, and this is a very important bill for us to address. So I hope that answers the senator's question.
Further discussion? Are you ready for the question? Okay, question being called. All those in favor of Senator Ellis's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, they do so with the recommendation that Senate File 37 do pass, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay, Senate File 37 has passed the committee of the whole. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 115. Oh, sorry. Majority Floor Leader.
Madam Chairman, I request the committee of the whole stand to the east of the sound of the gavel. Microphone.
I'm sorry.
Madam Chairman, I request the committee of the whole stand to the east of the sound of the gavel for about a 10-minute break.
Heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any 10 minutes. We need to start making our way back to the chamber. We got enough yet? We're short? Okay. Sure. Okay. Committee of the Whole will please come back to order. The first bill that we'll take a look at for our consideration is Senate File 115. Will the reading clerk read the bill?
Senate File 115, Behavioral Health Redesign Amendments 2, an act relating to public health and safety, sponsored by Senator Baldwin, was referred to Committee Number 10, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Barlow, Dockstader, and Hutchings. No, Senator Bouchard. Senator Baldwin, Chairman.
Heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Baldwin?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation on Senate File 115, Behavioral Health Redesign Amendments 2. For explanation of that bill, I call on myself. Folks, this is a cleanup bill for all intents and purposes. Those of you who were here in 2021 will remember the behavioral redesign bill that we did, House Bill 38. It was a fairly extensive bill. It was complex. Since then, we've been doing a lot of minor tweaks and adjustments as we go. This bill represents one of those. Now, in July of 25, this redesign takes effect. So we're trying to get everything right before it takes effect. But then you will note in the bill that in a year, we have a sunset day where they come back and they have to report to the Joint Committee, the Labor and Health Committee, about where we're at, how many people are utilizing, whether we're getting the right people or not. The intent of the bill originally was to make sure that the payer of last resort was the state. Now, a couple things I would tell you about this bill. If you look at the bill itself, it's very short. It's 2.5 pages long, with the meat of the bill being on page 2. What has been happening, and if you can picture in your mind that there's 3 systems. We had the original, the way status quo was, how the community mental health centers were doing things, and then the behavioral health centers, the way they will do things once this redesign goes into effect. One of the things that happened with that, for 4 decades, we've been treating folks through the community mental health centers across the board. We've been treating people that had insurance, but their insurance had high deductibles, or their insurance had programs that didn't pay for some of the mental health services, like residential services or substance abuse treatment.
We did to start.
So we've been doing that for 4 decades. We found that through the model, through the redesign effort, we found out that we were going to accidentally drop some of these people that were getting that help for the last 40 years. We don't want to do that. We want to keep those people where we're at the status quo. In particular, it affected pregnant women and women with small children. And while this doesn't have an effect on the Medicaid program, what this does is it treats those people that have insurance but have very high deductibles that couldn't afford to get these things. This keeps them able to get those mental health services. It also, in general, benefits most everybody across the population, the Medicaid people, Medicare, et cetera. But it's those people that don't have the availability of getting those mental health services. What we're doing is we're preserving what's been going on for 40 years. We don't want them to drop off system. There's no increase in the number of people that are being seen. As I told you earlier on a separate piece of legislation, our community mental health services is a capped system. They have a regulated amount. It doesn't increase. This doesn't increase their clients. It has no effect on Medicaid. And this, frankly, is a cleanup bill just to keep things going. Next year, they're going to come back to us, the Department of Health, they're going to tell us how things are going. But this keeps us where we're at. We're not going to drop anybody off the system. We don't want people to lose their mental health care. I mean, it can have dire consequences, right? I mean, if you think about it, those are the people that end up in jails. They're the people that end up in the ER, or in the worst case, they end up in a state hospital.
or, I mean, there's a number of bad things can happen. We want to keep those services available for those people at the same cost it's always been. And I think it's important. So we want to get this cleanup bill done so we can move ahead. Next year, they'll come back and tell us how we're doing. So I would encourage your aye vote.
Discussion on Senate File 115? Questions?
Question.
Okay. Question has been called. All those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 115 do pass, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay, Senate File 115 has passed the Committee of the Whole. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 61.
Senate File 61, Education Charter School Amendments, sponsored by Senator Driscoll, an act relating to charter schools. It was referred to Committee Number 4, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Beitman, Brennan, Ruff, Scott, and Steinmetz. Senator Scott, Chairman.
For the reading of the bill, what is your pleasure, President Driscoll? Oh, sorry, Senator Scott.
Madam Chairman, I move when the Committee of the Whole rise and report it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 61 do pass. It was a standing committee amendment. I ask it be read in at this time.
Senate File 61, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 2, line 1, delete.
Madam Chairman, I move adoption of the standing committee amendment. Madam Chairman, to explain the standing committee amendment, I'm going to have to explain the bill. Consulted with the bill sponsor, and he said, just go ahead, get it all explained to save time. Bill borders on a technical correction, but there is some significant money at stake here. There's two issues in the bill. One is who's going to serve as the LEA, Local Education Agency, for dealing with the federal government. And the second issue is the timing of the payments that they actually fund the charter schools, deal with the LEA issue, and it is important. The federal government does provide significant funding for education. My memory is, and I don't know, it changes a little bit from year to year, we're in the vicinity of 15% of the money we spend on education comes through the normal federal sources. Now that doesn't count the special things that happened in the CARES Act and the other COVID relief funding. But in normal times, it's around 15%. We have a lower percentage, Madam Chairman, in this state than many other states because we fund our schools much better. The feds insist on having a local education agency to deal with, so we have to say, who's that going to be? And the way we're wanting to structure it with the standing committee amendment is that the charter schools that are approved through the local school district will give them an option. Either the charter school can be the LEA or the local school district, and we'll let them settle that. This bill is designed to let them settle that between the two of them. With a standing committee amendment, charter school that's approved, that was approved centrally, will now be the LEA. We don't, originally it was the 5 elected officials that were doing this. We've created last year a special board to do that. We don't want to build them into an agency and have the kind of staff and that sort of thing that it needs to deal with the federal government. So we'll have the local schools that are affected do that. And that's the provision in the amendment, standing committee amendment. That's the first three, the page 2 items. really get that all squared away, because the bill was going to take it just one way, and we want to give the local people an option, Madam Chairman. Second issue is found on page 3, lines 5 through 10. School district shall use the schedule of distribution required under 2113-313C, or in accordance with an alternate schedule agreed to by the school district and the charter school. The standing committee amendment makes a technical correction of that as incorporated in agreement pursuant to WS thus and such. So, Madam Chairman, that we'll get the charter schools funded in the same way, on the same schedule that the local school district will be funded, and that's where the money, how the money will flow through. So that's, Madam Chairman, that's both the bill and standing committee amendment. I'll be happy to answer any questions on the standing committee amendment.
Senator Scott, did you move that amendment? I couldn't remember.
Madam Chairman, I'm not sure whether they did or not, but I'll do it now and make sure.
Okay. Any discussion on the standing committee amendment? Okay. All those in favor of Senator Scott's motion to adopt standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate File 61, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Okay, the standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate File 61 has passed. Back on the bill.
Madam Chairman, I have explained the bill as well as I can after the last night we had. And if anybody else, any of the co-sponsors or the sponsor want to add anything to the explanation, now is the time. Otherwise, I'm going to call for the question or see if there are any questions before we have to call for the question.
Any questions on the bill? Okay, question being called then. All those in favor of Senator Scott's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 61 do pass, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Okay, Senate File 61 has passed the committee of the whole. Next bill for our considerations is Senate File 34. Will the clerk read the bill, please?
Senate File 34, Sex Offender Registration, Registerable Offenses, sponsored by the Judiciary Committee, an act relating to criminal procedure, was referred to Committee Number 1, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Case, Furphy, Landon, and Schuler. No, Senator Cooper. Senator Landon, Chairman.
Okay, you've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Landon?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would move that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with a do pass recommendation on Senate File 34, sex offender registration, registerable offenses, registerable offenses. That's a mouthful. So, Madam Chairman, what this bill does, this is another product of your Judiciary Committee's interim work. As I told you before, we had taken up these statutes, the sex offender statutes, and what this bill does, the bill inserts and amends criminal offenses for which convicted offenders must register under the Wyoming Sex Offender Registration Act, Register Act. Several offenses have been added to the registry based on recommendations from our Attorney General and others. The following is what are new into this proposed bill. Sexual servitude of an adult, 62705, is added to the statutes requiring an annual registration, and that registration is under 719-302. Sexual servitude of a minor, that's 62706, is added to the statutes requiring a semi-annual registration. And then first and second degree human trafficking, 62702 and 62703 are added to the statute requiring quarterly registration. So that's the main thing that the bill does Madam Chairman, but during our discussion on this bill, we had testimony which compelled the Judiciary Committee to take a harder look at 62316, which you will find in your bill on pages 3 and 4. That's where the Standing Committee amendment comes in, Madam Chairman. I would ask that it be read in at this time.
Senate File 34, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 3, line 6, delete.
So, Madam Chairman, regarding the Standing Committee amendment, I pointed to the language where we took another look at that. That was actually, in the opinion of the committee, placed in the wrong statute to begin with. That was an individual who was being required to register for the rest of his life. This particular individual was 25, his victim was 17, and I believe I understood that they are still together to this day. But here's what the Standing Committee amendment does, Senators. During our Judiciary Committee meeting, we would move the crime 62316, subparagraph A, Romanet 2, from the severe tier to the medium tier. In other words, we're suggesting with this Standing Committee amendment that this offense be moved to the second tier. There are 3 tiers, Madam Chairman, that we talked about earlier, 3 tiers of offenders in the sex offender statutes. There's a lower tier, which is registering one time a year for 10 years. There's a medium tier, 2 times a year for 25 years. And then there's the severe offenders, which we require to register 4 times a year for life. This backs this offense back down from that J tier back to the H tier. I hope that makes sense. That is a description of what the Standing Committee amendment does. I'd be glad to answer any questions. Otherwise, I would call for the question and hope you'll support the amendment.
Senator Landon, did you move that Standing Committee amendment?
Oh, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. My apologies. I move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 34.
Any discussion on the amendment? Okay, if not, I guess we're ready for the question. All those in favor of Senator Landon's motion to adopt Standing Committee Number 1 to Senate File 34, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Okay, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 34 is passed. Back on the bill.
Madam Chairman, I would ask for your support on the bill. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Would the good chairman please, I guess, just elucidate what the repealer is? It's a Title VII repealer. There is a repealer in the bill. And then we had a bill from this morning earlier in the day that had a different crime. I don't see it listed in this particular list. So maybe, why wasn't it just included in this bill at some point in your deliberations? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman.
Senator Landon.
So, Madam Chairman, to answer the second question first, the issue that we discussed with the previous bill, and by the way, I've been working on some answers to some of the good questions that came up on that bill. That was an issue that came to us separate from these, which are included in Senate File 34 at the request of the Attorney General and DCI. We just simply have not referenced these offenses in our statutes, and that's why they are imported into this bill for your consideration. The amendment is an addition in this bill, having come up during discussions of the bill. And so that's when the committee suggested the Standing Committee amendment, which we have just reduced the penalty and placed that in the middle tier. So I hope that answers the question regarding the repealer. I've got to do some homework and try to get back to you on that one.
Any other discussion on the bill? Are you ready for the question?
Question.
All those in favor of Senator Landon's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 34 do pass, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay, Senate File 34 has passed the committee of the whole. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 44. Will reading clerk read the bill?
Senate File 44, Limited Mining Operations Amendments, an act relating to environmental quality, sponsored by the Minerals Committee. It was referred to Committee Number 9, which turned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Dockstader, Ellis, and Jones. No, Senators Cooper and Rothfuss. Senator Dockstader, Chairman.
For the reading of the bill, what is your pleasure, Senator Dockstader?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I recommend that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, that it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 44. And to explain the bill, Senator Ellis.
Senator Ellis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a little flat-footed just because we moved the order, so I just want to make that the body aware for those of us remaining in the room and paying attention to the discussion right now. We brought this bill to you as a result of some discussions we had in the interim, and it was brought to us by our friends in the mining sector. And in particular, we have current law in our existing statutes that regulate small mines, and those are defined as areas that are smaller than 15 acres or less. And traditionally, we've viewed those as sand and gravel mining operations, but Madam Chair, we've learned that there are some other sectors such as gold, lithium, cobalt, and nickel, which are entering our market, and so this would help cover and make clear how those particular resources would be mined if they occur in small operations. It also covers things like bentonite. During the interim, we also heard some concerns about the role of local government, particularly our counties, how they can regulate, and so we sought to add some clarifying amendments to make sure that private property rights are protected, that counties still play an integral role in zoning regulations and providing conditions, but that they can't really deny all of these operations without some clarity in our statutes. So with that, Madam Chair, we also have a standing committee amendment, and I'd ask that it be read in.
Senate File 44, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 7, after.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 44, and I will explain the Standing Committee amendment in the bill. So the first thing that would do, as you'll see, is make a clarifying change on page 1, line 7. Again, this would, rather than saying specify how counties cannot prevent limiting mining operations, we're trying to specify how counties and zoning regulations may be applied to limited mining operations. So that's a reflection of the Standing Committee amendment. Going on to page 2, you'll see the clarification by mentioning Title 18, Section 5201. And if we were to adopt the Standing Committee amendment as a body, this paragraph would now read, nothing in this chapter shall be construed to limit a county's authority to providing conditions for limited mining operations authorized under the statute in accordance with the statute. And so, Madam Chair, our intent is to say that counties certainly can impose time limits and other conditions for travel that might impact neighbors, but they can't deny that already. So that was the concession we made as a result of the Standing Committee. But going on, you'll see on the bottom of page 2, this is kind of where we get to the meat of providing for some other additional opportunities. Our current statutes only limit this to sand, gravel, scoria, limestone, dolomite, shale, ballast, and feldspar. So we have adopted a new definition of talking about any non-coal minerals, except those minerals which are regulated by the U.S. States Nuclear Regulatory Commission. For your edification, that's uranium and rare earths. Those are regulated entirely differently. So what we are talking about is things like bentonite, gold, lithium, cobalt, and nickel. And so that's the definition you'll see there. Going on to page 3, more clarification. You'll see with the Standing Committee amendment, this new language that would start on line 16 on page 3 would now read, this paragraph shall be construed to limit a county's authority to provide conditions under WS 18-5-201 through 208 for limited mining operations authorized under this paragraph. So a conforming amendment to reflect what we're seeking to achieve on page 2. Going on to page 3, This has to deal with bonds. The first part of paragraph B, beginning on line 1, talks about the bonding requirements for sand and gravel and those traditional minerals. But then moving on, you'll see that those have been increased. We're just trying to keep those modern and reflective of current market. But beginning on 12, you'll also see some reference to other non-coal minerals and what the bonding requirements would be for those particular operators. You'll see some extensions on the number of days that are allowed and required to obtain those. And then some clarification about what happens for limited mining operations that existed before July 1st. That's the date when this act would take effect. It would say that they would be required to file bonds in accordance with that subchapter by August 15th. So they would need to start complying with this. Along those lines, on page 5, right now, the person that's operating a limited mining operation, if they were to cease operations, would just file their intention during their next annual report. We wanted to tighten that up and say within 45 days after they planned to shut down their operation. That way that those areas could be reclamated and restored. Paragraph D is much, I think, a conforming amendment on page 5, going on to page 6, another conforming amendment. On the bottom of page 6, though, you'll see, again, we're just trying to provide more clarification on what happens for those mines that are currently in operation right now. And you'll see just some language talking about the conditions that apply to those, but prospectively, those coming online after July 1st, 2024, what they'd have to meet in order to get approval for their limited mining operation. Going on to page 7, paragraph K. Right now, this is a reporting requirement for the operator, and it currently includes things like reporting the name and address of the individual, the location of where the mine is, the number of acres affected, et cetera. But here we'd be adding some additional requirements, including the number of yards or tons of minerals that were sold during the past year. And then, you can read the rest of it. The rest of this has to deal with renewals. Certainly we recognize that for the continuation of these, that is currently allowed and something we want to do, but DEQ wants to just kind of keep an eye on how long and what kind of actual need there is for that continual development of those minerals. And if the operator or owner can't do that, then certainly we would be looking at how to reclaim those areas. So you can read all of those additional requirements, just evidence that there actually is a need for the continuation of the limited mining operation. Going on to page 8, you'll see some clarifying amendments on bonding requirements. We added some language going on to page 9. For any LMO, the Land Quality Administrator may recommend to the DEQ a release of the bond after 2 successful growing seasons. And then you'll see more language with that intention on the bottom of page 9. Finally, on page 10, this is the effective date. It would allow the Environmental Quality Council to start rulemaking, but the act wouldn't take effect until July 1st. So with that, Mr. Chairman, or Madam Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Discussion on the amendment first? Let's do that first. Any discussion on the amendment? Are you ready for the question on the amendment? Okay. All those in favor of Senator Ellis's motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 44, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay, Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 44 has passed. Back on the bill. Senator Boner.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just a quick question on page 9 about those bonding provisions and the ability to release a bond after only 2 years. It looks like the current status is 5 years unless the landowner signs off on it earlier. I'm just wondering why it seems like a pretty significant change to let the DEQ make that decision. I don't see any opportunity for the landowner to weigh in, and obviously you're shortening the time frame quite a bit. So just a little bit more discussion as to the reason why that change is in there.
Further discussion? Oh. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if you read the entire paragraph, this is dealing with all the bond provisions. This would apply just for the limited mining operations. They're just not as large in size. And so that was something we discussed in the interim is does a smaller mining operation have to comply with the other requirements that larger mines have to? We thought that it would just make sense to provide a little bit of a distinction for the smaller, limited mining operation. And, you know, something else I failed to mention in my introduction of this bill is certainly there might be instances where this limited mining operation might grow in size. At that point, all of the other provisions that apply to non-limited mining operations would kick into effect. So my apologies for not raising that sooner, but that's why we had that particular language added.
Further discussion? Senator Boner?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And that helps a little bit. I understand these are smaller in nature, and I did read the paragraph. I think I understand the changes here. But in my experience, reclamation is reclamation. You're replanting seeds. You're making sure that those seeds actually grow into the vegetation that you're hoping to have there. If that fails, it's kind of a big deal. You've ruined the land, and somebody's going to have to come in there and fix it. It seems maybe the landowner, if the DEQ decides just to move on without any input from the landowner who is affected. So I'm not sure, you have to have a little bit more explanation as to how the size of the reclamation is relevant to actually having a successful reclamation, which means that you have reestablished the plant life. And as a result, you have adequate topsoil, there's not going to be as much erosion, so on and so forth. And, you know, to me, I'm struggling to understand why the size is necessarily relevant to all that.
Senator Ellis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to back up a little bit about the purpose of this bill, these are smaller operations. They're not generally or necessarily multi-million-dollar large coal mining operations that employ, you know, thousands of people. These are often mom and pop kind of operations. So that's why we've made some adjustments to the language that you'll see. This is really about trying to allow the private property owner who owns 15 acres or less having the ability to develop their minerals on their property. So you'll see those adjustments in the bonds on page 4. I would just add, you know, I certainly understand the senator's concern, but that we were very cautious in using the word may. It says the land quality administrator may recommend the release of the bond, and that language also is echoed on the bottom of page 9. DEQ, as you well know, is in the business of reclamation, and I think they, you know, everyone in our state takes great pride in reclamation projects. They're things we like to show off. So if 2 successful growing seasons isn't enough to establish permanent vegetative cover, that's the key language, then they don't have to recommend the release of the bond. So this is our way of recognizing that the DEQ, through their land quality administrators, have experience in this, and we're providing with that discretion to only may do it if it's ready, and certainly if it's not and the vegetation cover's not there and reclamation hasn't been completed, they wouldn't, or my understanding, my reading of the language would be that they wouldn't recommend release of the bond.
Any further questions or discussion? Okay, question being called. All those in favor of Senator Dockstetter's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 44 do pass, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay, Senate File 44 has passed the committee of the whole. We're skipping over to Senate File 113 next. That'll be our next bill. Whoops. Will the reading clerk please read the bill? Almost gave him the wrong one.
Senate File 113, Light and High-Profile Vehicle Closures 2, sponsored by Senator Pappas, an act relating to highways, was referred to Committee Number 8, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brennan, Furphy, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Boner, Chairman.
You heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Boner?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move that when the committee of the whole rise to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation with Senate File 113. There is a standing committee amendment. I ask that it be read in at this time.
Senate File 113, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 1, lines 5 through 9, delete.
Okay, I will go ahead and defer to Senator Pappas.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This bill, as I mentioned on when we read it in, was the work of your Joint Transportation Committee during the interim. It's a very simple bill, and it became even more simpler in committee because of the standing committee amendment. So I'd like to, at this time, move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 113. Ladies and gentlemen, this bill creates a penalty for violating signs and markers and closures to light and high-profile vehicles. We already have the ability to fine for up to $750 for violating any, disregarding any markers or warnings. This goes one step further for violating that particular warning of light and high-profile vehicles. It takes the penalty up to $2,500 and subject to imprisonment for not more than 30 days. It also allows the ability to place the burden of the fine on the driver. So that all the meat of the bill is basically on page 2 and 3, lines 20 through 23 and 1 through 8 on page 3. Now, what the good folks at Driver Services during our committee meeting certainly made this bill a lot simpler. If you look at page 3 under definitions, we tried to define a serious traffic violation. On page 4, we had mandatory revocation of licenses, and on page 5, we had mandatory suspension of licenses. Well, what they did, and if you look at the, I'll address the amendment right now, what they did is we deleted on page, the meat of the amendment, if you look on line 13, we deleted that 49 CFR, and instead we inserted any driver licensing action, and then inserted under Wyoming Statute 31-5-229. So Wyoming Statute 31-5-229 is our reckless driving statute. So basically, that covers everything that we were trying to accomplish on page 3, 4, and 5. It includes revocations, it includes suspensions. It also has actually a lot more teeth than what we had in the bill to begin with. Additionally, the state will be able to suspend their driver's license for 90 days on the first conviction, and then 6 months for the second conviction within 5 years. And then, of course, subsequent convictions could get their license completely revoked for over a year. So anyhow, the bill is something that will allow our interstates especially, but all roads in the state of Wyoming to be able to stay open in inclement weather, because we've just experienced too many blowovers because people have ignored the light and high profile vehicle signs. And the fine of $750 was just not making it. The companies were just taking the risk and running the sign. Now, with the $2,500 fine and with the driver being personally responsible for it, hopefully we won't have any more, or we'll have less instances of road closures in Wyoming. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Let's go with discussion on the amendment first. Any discussion on the amendment? Senator Larson, are you standing up or no? Okay. Oh, sorry. Senator Landon.
So, Madam Chairman, thank you. Just real quickly, I've never seen the phrase on the amendment, page 3, line 7. We're deleting a reference, I believe, to what must be federal statute or whatever, and inserting any driver licensing action. Maybe the bringer of the amendment could help me with that. I've never seen that phrase before.
Senator Pappas.
Madam Chairman, that was the language that the driver's licensing driver's services had come to us with. So any action, driving license action, subsequent to 31/5/229 will be deemed reckless driving. And so I don't know what actually that federal regulation pointed to initially, but they suggested we didn't even need it, and so that any action, and if there's a conviction under that other section, shall be deemed reckless driving. Again, I could ask driver services again about that language, but it seemed logical to the committee, so we went with it. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, are you ready for the question? All those in favor of Senator, Boner's a motion to adopt the Standing Committee number 1 to Senate File 113, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay, Standing Committee number 1 to Senate File 113 is passed. We're back on the bill. Do you have any more discussion or further questions on the bill? Oops. Senator Scott.
Madam Chairman, my question is really quite simple. What vehicles are actually covered? I have some sense what they mean by light and high profile, but I don't know precisely what it is. Does it involve ordinary automobiles? Is it all commercial vehicles? Is it, do you have to be both light and high profile, or are they separate? If we could have some explanation on that, Madam Chairman, it'd be much easier to understand the bill.
Senator Pappas. Oh, whoops, sorry.
I'll take another question.
Sorry. Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a couple of problems here. Usually when they close the highway, it's 40,000 pounds or less. And I can tell you from experience, tanker trucks have a totally different body shape to them, so the wind does not tend to blow over tankers the same way it does a dry freight trailer. So, and there's a lot of things that travel even in the wind. I mean, fuel, water, crude oil, a lot of things like that that have to move. I mean, oil production doesn't stop for wind. All the cars that are driving out there, they need fuel. So I've wondered when I've seen these 40,000 pound restrictions, and I'm still driving, honestly, because I'll be empty, and that truck does not have the same wind resistance or ability to roll. I mean, it has the ability to roll, but it doesn't get pushed by the wind the same way. So was there any discussion in the committee about tankers? Because they certainly do, it's a different animal than a dry van trailer. The other thing here is, man, this is a really deep dive, going that much money and also reckless driving. It's a total change. When I see these things change, sometimes you're en route past where that sign has told you. So how do we have any protections for the drivers that did not knowingly or intend to break the rules? Because if and I'll give you a good for instance, if you're driving north on 25 before you get to just outside of town, there's a sign there, and that's the one that you'll see. It'll say 40,000, gross vehicle weight are prohibited. But if you got past that sign, I mean, you're not supposed to be on your phone. It's not like they announced it on the radio. How are we to have some safeguards in place so commercial drivers aren't just unnecessarily penalized? So 2 questions: the trailer that are tankers, and safeguards. Thank you.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. To the first question about the vehicle, there's been a lot of data that the University of Wyoming and other folks at WYDOT have come up with to determine the effects of wind on vehicles. And in the past, it's been a very ambiguous definition for drivers, very ambiguous. You know, the way they knew they were a high and or a light and high-profile vehicle is when they blew over, then they got a ticket. So that wasn't working well. So they've done a bunch of research, and there's a lot of data regarding the types of winds, the wind directions, and how it's interfacing at different places on the highway. And so now they are putting definitions of what a light vehicle is. So there's a restriction for certain, and it'll change. At different parts of the road, different wind speeds. But to the question about profile of vehicles, yes, they did mention there were different profiles of vehicles. However, I don't know that they have anything right now to determine whether it's a box van or whether it's a tanker or, but I know they're continually working on this. And the way that drivers are notified about this, number one, is at all the ports of entry where they have to stop. There are going to be variable message signs everywhere that will warn them of the penalties along with the conditions. And there are online, there's an online portal that every driver logs into to get all the information that they need for traversing the state, and it'll all be on that website as well. So I don't know if my committee has any other, remembers anything else from the conversation, but I'll defer to them as well. Thank you.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. To answer the question from my friend from Base Creek, it's not limited to only commercial vehicles, it's to any vehicle. So if you're hauling an empty trailer and you get blown over because you violated the closure, then you'd be equally susceptible. That was an important provision for our trucking industry, so they didn't feel necessarily singled out there. As to my friend from Laramie County who's in the trucking business, I point out the bottom of page 2, it clearly states the violation is when you go past a notification and ignore it. So if it happens while you're en route, if you do something other than willfully violate and drive past that closure notice, then you're going to be okay. So it's, I'm not an attorney, but I think you have to have some knowledge, and if they're going to fine you, they should be able to prove that you had some knowledge that you were violating the law there. So I'll get back on the whole idea of whether a tanker, a low profile, lower center of gravity trailer will qualify. I want to say it still says some high profile language in there, so it would, in my mind, that would not include, say, an oil field tanker. But I could get back after we talk to the department. I just, off the top of my head, I do not remember whether it says, enclosed trailers or enclosed high profile vehicles, but we can get back to you on that. But I think with the improvements with the department communicating better what exactly this means, I think there's been a significant improvement, but we can definitely, try to further make that distinction. The challenge is how do you take all the work that the university did, which did take into account the type of trailer, and communicate that over a variable message sign? That's a fundamental limitation we're dealing with. So good questions. I will get back on that one about the different types of trailers.
Any further discussion? Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So this isn't a discussion for this bill, but it's certainly something I'm going to bring to the interim for the management council consideration. Is when I talk to but it's in this bill, it's germane to this bill because it's part of the penalty. The penalty has jail time. Jail time allows the accused to have a trial go to a $450 fine and a $1,600 trial if they actually wanted to go through a trial process at a circuit court. So we have numerous violations, whether it's fishing without a license or this type of things that have a fine, but they also have jail time. Jail time requires a certain level of due process. That requires the opportunity to go to trial. So at some point, I think we need to have a discussion about that component of it. Now, it's not, this bill is not the context to do that, but I think more broadly, that ought to be something that this interim committee takes up. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator Pappas?
Yeah, just on that point, I wanted to just to bring to your attention that the actual 30 days that's in here, the maximum is actually less than the penalty for reckless driving. For reckless driving in the state of Wyoming, it's a maximum penalty of $750 and imprisonment of up to 6 months. So what we're doing here is we're making a higher penalty of $2,500, but we're lowering the imprisonment to a max of 30 days. Just for your edification.
Any further discussion, or are you ready for the question? Oh, whoops, hang on. Senator Scott.
Madam Chairman, on and against the bill. It seems to me that if we're going to put severe penalties, and these are severe penalties in here, on violating and driving a high-profile vehicle, we've got to have a clearer understanding of what the violation really is and what qualifies as a high-profile vehicle. I still don't know, after listening to the explanation, do any of the private automobiles that are not pulling a trailer, do any of them qualify? And if so, which ones? What sizes of trailers do they come? Is it a weight thing? Is it a length plus weight? How do you know that that's what you've got? Some of them are pretty obvious. Anybody driving would know, but then there's a gray area. And I just don't see that there. It seems to me that this bill is premature, that before we do that and do these things to the penalties, we've got to better define what vehicles count as violating it and get that publicized so that people know what is forbidden. Because it doesn't seem to me, Madam Chairman, from the discussion we've had, that we're at that state yet, that many of the drivers that might be accused of violating this will know that they are, because it's just not clear what qualifies.
Senator Cole.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll take a crack at that question. It did come up, and the answer that came back from WYDOT is they have an absolutely new system evaluation that is much more articulate, much more accurate, that conveys the information to the motoring group, in this case trucks and light vehicles, that they say is adequate enough to give the truck drivers, let's talk about truck drivers right now, the information they need to make a decision about do they qualify. So in the past, you are exactly right. There was nothing except for, blowover hazard, no information. Nobody really knew what the heck that meant. Was it different types of trailers obviously have different kinds of risks. An empty box trailer is different than a flatbed. So they're identifying them as categories and being very clear and explicit about it. I think if this makes it through on the next reading, probably get more information to articulate that more accurately, but it was discussed thoroughly during the committee meetings. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Boner?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We did get the statistics from WYDOT. I'm not unaware of any personal vehicles that were blown over. It's all either commercial tractor trailer or a personal one. Think of a one that you might use to move from one place to the next. I'll verify that, but the idea of a personal vehicle just blowing over didn't come up because it doesn't happen, at least not according to YDOT data. So, so hopefully that helps a little bit. Like Senator Barrasso currently pointed out, and we've discussed numerous times, that we've made tremendous improvements in communication. I agree, that's an important first step. I don't think this bill would be appropriate without that improved communication, but that's been going on for months now, Madam Chairwoman. So I think we are at a spot where we can move forward with this piece of legislation. If something the committee briefly considered was, do we want to define that in statute? Is that a wise thing to do? We decided that it was not, that it's best left to the department, but that's an option for any legislator that may feel uncomfortable with the definition side of it.
Are we ready? Oh, sorry. Senator Bouchard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't think this bill is ready for prime time. If you're carrying a hazmat load and you're at 39,000 pounds, but at the same time you don't have a safe haven to bring that tractor trailer, where are you going to put it? You can't bring it onto private property unless you had written permission. I mean, there's just a lot of other factors here that I don't think were even considered. The issues with the tanker trailer profile, I mean, there are things that need to move, and what we're doing is clogging up the works for a few bad actors. And don't get me wrong, it's serious. I've been on the road and seen it happen, and it's usually they're just going too fast. They're on the road at the wrong time. I mean, especially in the ice roads. But on the 40,000 pound restriction is usually what I see. If you're carrying a hazmat load, you can't just pull over on the side of the road and say, okay, we're going to stop. There are restrictions on that load of where you can stop. Did anybody talk about that in committee? I mean, I think that this bill is not ready for prime time because of that. And you're going to put people in harm's way, drivers in harm's way, that are doing their job. And when we have these hazmat loads, we have companies that carried various hazmat into Wyoming. I just don't know what we're going to do with those people. So I would urge you just to vote against the bill. Let's come back and let's rethink it again.
Senator Hicks, and then I'll come to Senator.
Madam Chairman, on and for the bill. You know, I drive I-80 a lot next to my two colleagues over here in the corner. I've seen more blowovers. I think the last estimate that I saw, that somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 to $15 million an hour goes down I-80. And so to the issue of hazmat. So what about the hazmat driver? Because the guy in front of him wasn't smart enough to pull over when it says 60 and 70 mile an hour winds. And then the truck blows over, and then they all stack up, or he piles into the backup. That's the biggest risk we have with blowovers, is then it causes a chain reaction out there, and it takes days. So what's that hazmat driver doing there? Sitting piled up in a bunch of trucks for a day or two, waiting for him to clear the traffic. So it's a catch-22 in certain situations, but I would tell you it's probably a higher probability that these guys are going to get trapped out there for half a day or 2 days. Time is money on that interstate. Time is money, and every time one of these blows over, it shuts down not only the economy in Wyoming, but half the economy and all that traffic that goes. Over $10 million an hour in commerce going down that highway. So it's not perfect, folks. We can work on it in Second Amendment, but this is a real problem.
Any further discussion, or are we, guess we're not ready yet. Hang on. Senator Ralphus.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Briefly, I think the good majority leader probably pointed to the appropriate solution. This is only committee of the whole. I do think there are some challenges with this legislation, and the specificity is one of those challenges. The idea of what do we do with a load that's not capable of stopping, that might be a hazmat load. What do we do with that? That's a good challenge. But I think it's appropriate to address these challenges. This was a good debate. It raised some issues. I think it's appropriate to address those issues for second reading, and hopefully those will come in the form of an amendment in second reading for us to consider. I think this is an important piece of legislation for us to keep considering for the reasons the majority leader noted. We've all been through that. We've all experienced I-80 and high winds, and we all know what this bill is trying to stop. And I think everyone in here agrees that we want to stop that. So hopefully we can move this along, give it another chance, try and remedy that. And if we can't remedy it, then there's third reading to contemplate. But at this point in time, I'd ask the body to move it forward.
Are we ready for the question? Okay, question being called. All those in favor of Senator Boner's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 113 do pass, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Okay. Senate File 113 has passed the committee of the whole. Okay. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 66. Will the reading clerk read the bill?
Senate File 66, Water Exchange Amendments, an act relating to water, sponsored by the Water Committee, was referred to Committee Number 5, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators French, Hicks, Ide, Kolb, and Larson, and Steinmetz. Senator Steinmetz, Chairman.
Okay, you've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Steinmetz?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 66 do pass. And there is a standing committee amendment, if you could read it in at this time.
Senate File 66, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 2, line 22, after.
All right, for an explanation of the bill and the amendment, I call on Senator Hicks.
Senator Hicks.
Madam Chairman, this deals with water right exchanges, and so why don't you just look at the title. This is a very simple bill, clarifying that water rights are not lost in an exchange. Also, clarifying the applicable sources of water in an exchange. And Madam Chairman, the amendment provides for a public notice. So just to walk you through the bill real quick, this is just exactly what it says, is trying to clarify some confusions that have been had with exchanges. You get over to page 2, it just says, from what source can you do in an exchange, the new language, or from another appropriation from the same source. Get down to the bottom of page 2, just says the rights of other appropriators will not be or injuriously affected thereby. This is a clarification. This is just cleanup of the language. And then I'll bring in the standing committee amendment at this point in time. So if you go to bottom of page 2, line 22 after interest, this just inserts a notice that any petitioner for exchange at their cost, that the state engineer will require a notice in the local paper 30 days before a final action by the state engineer on an exchange. And then, Madam Chairman, you flip over to page 3, this is just new language that says no loss, abandonment, or impairment of any water rights involved in an exchange shall occur or attach a result of the exchange except as provided in the orders following exchange. And then you get to the second half of the standing committee amendment. Madam Chairman, I would move standing committee amendment number 1, and I think it's already been moved.
I don't think so.
Okay, I'll move standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate File 66. The second half of that just provides additional clarification that says exchange, upon termination of exchange, the rights of all appropriators under their original appropriation shall automatically be reinvested with all the rights, privileges, and uses and purposes therefore held and enjoyed. Madam Chairman, that's the bill.
Any discussion on the amendment? Should we go there first or the bill? Senator Barlow? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On the amendment, and maybe it's just a terminology question, it is a terminology question I have. Line 19 is reinvested, and I always thought when we talked about water rights, it was vested. So it should be, like I said, maybe I'm completely wrong, but investment is something you do with with funds vested is something you do with property rights. So it's just a question for clarity in my own mind, if that's the appropriate term. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Senator Hicks?
Madam Chairman, I will have the answer to that question on second reading.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Okay, question being called on the amendment. All those in favor of Senator Steinmetz's motion to adopt the standing committee standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate File 66, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Okay, standing committee number 1 to Senate File 66 is passed. The committee of the whole back on the bill now. Discussion on the bill. Senator Hicks?
Question.
Question.
Okay, question. Okay, all those in favor of Senator Steinmetz's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 66 do pass, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Okay, Senate File 66 has passed the committee of the whole.
Madam Chairman, I
Senator
move the
Hicks.
committee of the whole rise and report.
Okay, you've heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay. Oh, gosh. Thank you for that. Thanks.
Mr. President. Mr. President, your committee of the whole, having had under considerations bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 13, do pass. Senate File 32, do pass. Senate File 36, do pass. Senate File 22, do pass amended. Senate Joint Resolution 2, do pass. Senate File 50, do pass. Senate File 18, do pass. Senate File 37, do pass amended. Senate File 115, do pass. Senate File 61, do pass amended. Senate File 34, do pass amended. Senate File 44, do pass amended. Senate File 113, do pass amended. Senate File 66, do pass amended. Senator Schuler, Chairman.
Senator Schuler.
Oh, gosh. I move for the adoption of the committee of the whole report.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Report is passed. Reports from standing committees.
February 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 23, Public Utilities Energy Resource Procurement. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 2024, Mr. President, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 41, Banking Division, Classification and Salary Exemptions. Respectfully report same back to the Senate for the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 42, Low Carbon Reliable Energy Standards Amendments. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 57, Wyoming Adult Hearing Aid Program. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 77, Homeland Defense, Infrastructure Reporting and Investigating. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 102, Foreign Property Ownership, Critical Infrastructure. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senator Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 69, Hospice Care Reimbursements. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 64, Mineral Royalties, Proportional Severance Tax Refunds. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 53, 6th Judicial District, Number of Judges. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 75, Omnibus Water Bill Construction. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 106, Wyoming State Guard Amendments. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 26, Special District Vacancies. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Boner, Case, Landon, and Scott. Senator Case, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 27, Special Districts, Bond Elections Exemption. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Boner, Case, and Landon. No, Senator Scott. Senator Case, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 74, Special Districts, Reversal of Dissolution for Non-Compliance. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Boner, Case, and Scott. Excused, Senator Landon. Senator Case, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 79, Alt Beverage Franchise Agreements. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Boner, Case, and Scott. Excused, Senator Landon. Senator Case, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred Senate File 94, an act regarding compelled speech and state employers. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Beitman, French, Ide, McEwen, and Pappas. Senator Beitman, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 1, Judiciary, to whom is referred Senate File 63, Property Tax Exemption, Residential Structures 2. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Furphy, Landon, and Schuler. Excused, Senators Case and Cooper. Senator Landon, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 89, Veterans Ad Valorem Exemption Amount. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Boner, and Scott. No, Senator Case. Excused, Senator Landon. Senator Case, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 19, Developmental Preschool Funding. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, Committee Number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 24, Public Service Commission Integrated Resource Plans. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Boner, Case, Landon, and Scott. Excused, Senator Barlow. Senator Case, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, to Committee Number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred Senate File 25, Reclamation and Decommissioning Costs. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Bonner, Case, and Scott. No, Senator Barlow and Landon. Senator Case, Chairman. February 20, 2024, Mr. President, to Committee Number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred Senate File 100, Prompt Payment of Insurance Claims. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Bonner, Case, and Scott. Excuse Senator Landon. Senator Case, Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. Another couple notices. Today or tomorrow is the last day for bills in the original House. They're due out of committee on Wednesday, 2/21 tomorrow. So if you got a bill hung up in committee, you might want to go twist the arm of a chairman. Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Senate File 24, Public Service Commission Integrated Resource Plans, has an appropriation. We'd ask respectfully that it be re-referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations.
Without objection, so ordered. Senator Landon.
Mr. President, Senate File 63, Property Tax Exemption Residential Structures 2, has quite a bit of money involved. I would ask that it be re-referred to Appropriations.
Without objection, so ordered. Senator Kinski.
No.
Okay, sorry. Senator Case.
I think Senate File 89, Veterans Ad Valorem Exemption Amount, also has an appropriation, and ask that it be re-referred to Appropriations.
Objection, so ordered. Okay, last deal that came out of the Rules Committee, I'm going to read this off. Everybody needs to listen to it. This has to do with the appointment of Senator Larson to the Ag Committee. Rules Committee met this morning, February 20, 2024, to discuss the issue of the appropriateness under the Senate rules of 6 members serving on the Senate Agriculture, State and Public Lands, Water Resources Committee, Agriculture Committee. Senate Rules Committee determined that President Driscoll appointed Senator Dan Larson to the Agriculture Committee on February 28, 2023. Appointment was announced to the full Senate on that date. No objection to Senator Larson's appointment was made on the floor of the Senate on February 28, 2023, or at any time thereafter. The Senate Rule Committee notes that while Rule 2-2 small e provide the authority to the President to appoint committee members unless otherwise directed by the Senate, Senate Rule 2-7 does not allow for 6 members to be appointed to a Senate standing committee. A member of the Senate could object to the decision of the President to appoint Senator Larson to the Agriculture Committee pursuant to Senate Rule 2-8 and 8-6. This objection would carry by a majority vote of the members elected to the Senate, with the effect that Senator Larson would be removed from the Agriculture Committee. Absent such an objection, the President's appointment stands, and Senator Larson will continue to serve on the Agriculture for the remainder of the 67th legislature. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, we're at that order of business. That clears the desk, excuse me.
Mr. President, I move that we stand adjourned until 10 p.m. Wednesday, February 21st. 10 p.m.
Are there any announcements? Senator Case.
Mr. President, we're on the home stretch downstairs. Corporation's going to meet again. I hope it's not very long. We'd like to get out and march around this evening, but we're going to finish up with Senate File 97, Prohibition on Distribution of Unsolicited Ballot Forms, Senate File 114, Contractor License and Reciprocal Recognition Requirements, Senate File 120, Driver's License and Authorized Daily Restrictions. We still have a little work to do on Senate File 72, Utility Donations, possibly adopted amendment. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Senator Landon.
Mr. President, your Committee 1, Judiciary, will be gaveling in again down in room W4 to take up some property tax issues tonight. Senate File 126, Property Tax Exemption Inflation Cap 2. Senate File 119, Property Tax Exemption Specified Real Property 2. And Senate File 121, Property Tax Homeowners Exemption That is tonight in about 15 minutes down in W4. And then tomorrow morning, Mr. President, your Judiciary Committee will gavel right back in, and we will take up in that same room Senate File 107, e-cigarette and vapor material directory, and Senate File 123, minor name changes.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 10, Senate Labor, Health, and Social Services, will meet at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning to hear Senate File 98, Statute of Limitations, Medical Procedures on Minors, and Senate File 99, Chloe's Law, Children Gender Change Prohibition.
Senator Scott.
Mr. President, your committee number 4, Education, will meet tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., room W110 downstairs. Senate File 128, Approval of Charter Schools. Senate File 86, School Safety and Security Funding. Senate Joint Resolution 5, School Capital Construction Constitutional Amendment. And Senate File 95, Teacher Tenure. That's a continuation from the work we did yesterday on the final bill.
Senator Biden.
Mr. President, your committee number 3, Revenue, will meet 15 minutes upon adjournment to carry over the 2 bills that we worked on at lunch. Senate File 85, repeal the sales tax on electricity, and Senate File 130, equality state, not equity state. And I'll remind folks, tomorrow upon noon recess, it'll be Wednesday, February 21st, we got our last bill, Senate File 68, tangible personal property tax exemption, will be up upon noon recess tomorrow.
Senator French.
Mr. President, your committee number 5, Senate Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, will meet Thursday, February 22nd at 8 a.m. in the Capitol Extension Room 6 and online to consider the following bills. House Bill 10, Grace Period, State Land Lease Renewals, and House Bill 11, State Land Lease Amendments.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Minerals Committee, number 9, will meet 2 different times tomorrow to wrap up all the Senate committee bills, meeting in room 2 at 8 o'clock in the morning for Senate File 80, Solid Waste Management Definition Amendments, Senate File 96, Trust and Bank Assets in Bankruptcy Clarification, Senate File 131, Regulatory Reduction Task Force 2, and then again at 12 noon in room 4 to hear the following bills: Senate File 51, unlawful dissemination of misleading synthetic media, and Senate File 52, Wyoming Stable Token Act amendments. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Kinski.
Mr. President. Mr. President, the 5 o'clock deadline to have amendments for third reading has now passed. Your Appropriations Committee will meet at 9 a.m. tomorrow in W113 and online to consider first Senate File 132, American Rescue Plan Act Appropriations Amendments -4, the ARPA bill. We are the home committee for that bill. And then a series of re-referrals, Senate File 71, salaries for judges, Senate File 70, investment modernization, Senate File 121, if received, property tax homeowners exemption, Senate File 63, property tax exemption, Senate File 126, property tax exemption, Senate File 119, property tax exemption, and just referred, Senate File 36, property tax exemption, residential structures 2, Senate File 89, veterans ad valorem exemption, and Senate File 24, PSC, integrated resource plan, and we can intend to get those out as quickly as possible. Any re-referrals, get them to us, folks, please. We will meet at noon hour and try to knock those out. We don't want the sunset on Wednesday and you lose a bill because you didn't get it to appropriations. Thank you, Mr. President.
George Flaherty Hicks, you have something?
Yeah, Mr. President, we have canceled the meeting to go over the property tax bills tonight. The committees are still out there working hard. We've rescheduled that now for Thursday at 9 a.m. We'll go from 9 a.m. Thursday until 10:30 to get through all of those. We'll see what's left at that point in time. I have put on your desk here, and you may want to look at these, as it's already tracking what's already in the system. It has a little bit of information on when the effective date is, what the estimated property tax reduction would be in 2025, 2026, 27, fiscal impact, whether it requires an appropriation, a backfill, and then it just gives you a status. So this, we will update this thing as this moves forward, but right now we're scheduled for Thursday at 9 a.m. Before we come back in. So, Mr. President, downstairs, I don't remember, we were scheduled in room 5. It'll be one of the rooms below us down here. As soon as I get that room, I'll let you know.
Heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate will stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Wednesday, February 21, 2024.